Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Charlie Marks, and I am chairing today's meeting in the absence of the Chairman. I would like to welcome those members of the public and the press in attendance, and those who are watching the live stream of this meeting via YouTube. Whilst this meeting is being held publicly, it is also being streamed via YouTube. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and the recording of the meeting will be available to view on YouTube until such time as the minutes are produced. Please be aware that only audio from the microphone will be captured on the live stream. Therefore, those invited to speak need to ensure their microphones are on when speaking and are as close to you as is possible. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, can all present keep the microphones off except when invited to speak? Please ensure that the microphone is turned off when you have finished speaking. I would also ask that everyone ensures that their mobile phones are on silent or turned off for the duration of the meeting. With regard to the meeting, I must ask members of the public to refrain from interrupting. The only members of the public allowed to speak are those who have registered. Anyone who speaks must do so in a respectful and polite manner. It is right that there is meaningful discussion about the merits of an application, but we will not allow inappropriate language or personal attacks on councillors and their beliefs, on members of the public or officers' professional advice. We now go to agenda item 1, and I would like to ask member services if we have any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received from Councillors Connor and Councillor Hicks. We are expecting Councillor Gershner, but he may be delayed. Just to advise you, Chairman, that Councillor Booth is substituting today for Councillor Hicks, and Councillor Purser is also a substitute member today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 2 is to confirm and sign the minutes from the meeting of the 5th of July and the 26th of July 2023. Do I have a proposer to approve the minutes of the 5th of July? Councillor French. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Benny. Thank you. Does any member have any comments to make on the minutes of the 5th of July 2023? Please raise your hand. No? Okay. Can I have a show of hands to approve the minutes of the 5th of July 2023? Thank you. Minutes of the 5th of July are agreed. Do I have a proposer to approve the minutes of the 26th of July? Councillor Benny, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor French, thank you. Does any member have any comments to make on the minutes of the 26th of July 2023? Please raise your hand. No? Okay. Can I have a show of hands to approve the minutes of the 26th of July 2023? Okay, thank you. Item 3. We now go to agenda item number 3, which is urgent items. I will now hand over to David Rowan, Head of Planning, as he would like to discuss a matter regarding one of the applications coming this afternoon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So, agenda item 7 today concerns a site which has had a previous planning application refused by Cambridgeshire County Council. It was an application that went to the County Council as it involved a waste planning matter. Further correspondence received today from the County indicates that activity involving waste products may still be taking place at the site, and this is being looked into by both the County Council and also the Environment Agency. Given that the application on today's agenda has the potential to allow activity at the site which could be construed as waste related, there is a question mark therefore over whether the application should procedurally be determined at district level or not. It is therefore recommended to members that the application, the subject of agenda item 7, be deferred from today's agenda to allow this matter to be fully established. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Does anybody have any questions for David? Councillor French.
Thank you. My understanding, we'll look at what's in front of us today, what might or might not be. So can we have a confirmation on that, please?
Okay, any other questions for David? And then I think what we'll do is call Stephen Turnbull in, legal representative, to give us his take on this as well. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of Wisbech Mary Parish Council. I should declare that when the waste application came before the parish council, we recommended refusal, and I was involved in that discussion. But we did not discuss this application because it was sadly when the Queen passed away, so the meeting didn't take place where it would have been discussed. On that basis, given the similarity between the applications and what the officers have just said, I think I should declare that I will not take part in any discussion on that item.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Any further questions for David? Okay, I'd now like to invite Stephen Turnbull to give his view on this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have discussed this with David Rowan, and my view is to do with more good practice and procedure than the merits or demerits of this application, because there do seem to be elements of potential waste disposal, and the county council are looking at what's happening at the moment. And given that the scope of the application is quite broad and might well include dealing with waste, I agree with Dave that the sensible way to proceed with this, rather than muddle up the potential roles of the county council and the district council, is to find out what exactly is going on at the moment and what the county's view is, because I don't think the county have been officially consulted on this in terms of waste. And the best practice way forward would be to defer this application and deal with it when the facts are known and more is known about what's proposed.
Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I can't see what bearing that the waste application has. They're two separate applications. It's been heard at county and was refused, but we're looking at builder's yard, and that's what's in front of us today. And I really feel that why should we not look at this today and deal with it today?
Well, through you, Chad, there's no legal reason why you can't determine it today. I think the view we officers and myself take is it's best practice to defer it, because you'll know more of the factual background next time round. You know more of the proposal that's been put forward, and you most importantly, you'll know what the county as waste disposal authority, what their view is. We don't know what that view is today.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at a builder's yard today, and if there is illegal activity on that site, then that'll be dealt with by county, and that'll be up to prosecution or whatever that needs to be. We've got an application that is live. It's been in for since 2002, and you know, I think we should look at this today and deal with it today. Be another application. I mean, we've got a fairly late agenda today. Who knows? We could have 17, 18 items on the agenda next month, and this could just drag on and on and on. If there is illegal activity, that will be dealt with by way of prosecution. And we're looking at land usage today, which is this site suitable for a builder's yard? I think we should look at it today.
Thank you. Would you like to respond?
I think the second one is.
Okay. I think the best thing we can do is put this to the vote if we should take this forward or not. All those in favour of hearing this item this afternoon, please raise your hand. Okay, with Councillor Booth obviously abstaining, then that's unanimous. We will continue and hear this item. Thank you. Okay, we now go to the main part of the meeting, the planning application. Proposals are now being dealt with sorry, item 4, sorry. Agenda item number 4 is declarations of interest. Member services will go to each councillor in turn, and can you please state if you have anything to declare in relation to the agenda item?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. As usual, member of Chatteris Town Council, I have to no part in the subcommittee or the decision making at full council if there's any applications come forward. Also, Mr Hall's got an application in from Morton Hall today. Matthew's done work for myself, and he's also done work and worked with him on Growing Fenland project at Chatteris and still carrying on with that, so I do know him. Item number 8, I've had a word with the solicitor today, a legal officer, and because the applicant's wife is a member of Chatteris Town Council, I've been advised by the solicitor to step away from this one, so I will be on item 8.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs French.
Thank you. A member of March Town Council, but don't take part. There's two agenda items 6 and 11. I wasn't present when these were discussed.
Thank you. Councillor Imafidon.
I have no interest in any of the agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marks.
Thank you. I'm a member of Mead Parish Council, but take no part in the planning. On item number 10, I have taken legal advice on this. The applicant was known to me via business, but has been closed for at least 5 years. And also, one of our members of staff actually has a bordering property to this property. However, I've given no reflection and remain open-minded on this application.
Thank you. Councillor Booth.
On agenda item 9, I'm a member of Parson Grove Parish Council. I take part in discussion on planning matters. I don't consider myself predetermined on this application. However, I will step away from the discussion on that point. On item 12, I'm not a member of Gorefield Parish Council, but I did attend the meeting where it was discussed, but obviously wasn't involved in the decision making. So, sorry. Yeah, I've got an open mind. I mean, yeah.
Councillor Purser.
Yes, I'm a member of March Town Council. I'm now chairman of the Planning Committee on March Town Council. However, I've not seen any of the items of actually on the agenda today, so I'm not predetermined anyway in any, have a completely open mind, and I don't actually remember seeing items number 6 or 11 before, so therefore nothing to declare on as far as that's concerned. I have taken legal advice on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Councillor Gershner. Have you got any declarations?
I have, yeah. My apologies for being slightly late. There was an accident which I was a witness to. Item FYI 21 1449. Letter B. I was a member of Whittlesea Town Council Planning when this was discussed and determined. We did declare an interest at the time, but I will take no part in the discussion or voting on that item.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. We now go to the main part of the meeting, the planning application. Proposals are now being dealt with in a slightly differently. Members should still only make a proposal when invited. However, in the interest of the time management, I will initially be looking for a proposal to go with the officer's recommendation. Clearly, if no such proposal is forthcoming, or if that proposal fails, I will then be looking for a proposal to go against the recommendation. Members are reminded that any such proposal should be accompanied by the planning reasons for doing so. I will now hand over to David Rowan, Development Manager, to present FYR 21-1449/F, agenda item number 5.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for the change of use of a public house to 3 dwellings, involving the demolition of a rear existing extension at the letter B public house, 53 to 57 Church Street, Whittlesea. So the application site is shown in red on the location plan and aerial photo. It sits at the corner of London Street and Church Street within Whittlesea Conservation Area and opposite the Grade 2 star listed St Andrew's Church. The slide on screen shows the proposals to facilitate the subdivision of the public house into 3 dwellings, mainly in terms of the provision of amenity space and facilities such as bin storage. The floor plans now on screen show how the building would be divided. So there would be units at ground and first floor, and these are shown on the left-hand side of the building there with the sort of the purple and the green outlines. And then there would be a unit across both floors of the building shown on the right with the orange outline. An existing single-storey extension would be removed at the rear of the building, and this is shown with the dotted lines on the upper image. The elevations of the proposed development are shown here. So the elevations at the building at the time of the application originally being submitted from September 22 are shown here. Subsequently, the building has been sold to a new owner, albeit the original applicant remains the same. And subsequent to that sale, the building has been renovated externally and is currently operating as a public house, as can be seen in this street view image. So to summarise, as the public house is currently operational, it is considered that its conversion to residential use would result in the loss of a community facility, which would be contrary to policy LP6 of the local plan. The application is therefore recommended for refusal on this basis, as set out within the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, David. We have no speakers on this application, so I would like to invite members to put questions to officers. Councillor Benny.
Thank you, Chairman. David, just to correct what I'm thinking, or to other support, correct me if I'm thinking wrong. I understand when it is a pub that it has, if it's going to be converted from a pub that is working, which this one is, it has to be marketed in a certain way for a period of time to prove that there is no use for this, so we don't lose a community asset. Would that be correct?
That would be correct, yes.
And can you tell us if this has happened with this pub at all? Any of the marketing to sell this?
The application's had a bit of a life, shall we say? So when it was originally submitted, the pub had been marketed as a sort of a pub. Evidence had been sort of put forward that there was no take up for that, and therefore that was the kind of the justification for the conversion to residential. Clearly, the world's moved on in the meantime, and we've now got a pub that has actually been sold and is now operating as a pub. So that the sort of I suppose that the evidence is sort of there in terms of you can go in and buy a drink.
You go round then, David. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, just to follow up on Councillor Benny's point. Again, I understand the policy is if they say that it isn't economically viable to run it as a business, that they have to provide a clear business case as such. And I believe from the report you say that hasn't been provided as part of this application.
Through you, Chairman, yeah, that's correct.
Any further questions?
Sorry, just to follow on Councillor Benny's point, can I just ask how long is the period that it has to be marketed for?
Sorry, was that how long has it been marketed for, or how long would it need to be marketed for? While it's perhaps not relevant to this application, Councillor French is sticking two fingers up at me, which I'm hoping is an indication that would be 2 years rather than anything else.
Yes, you're absolutely correct, David. It is 2 years. We've had this repeatedly over the last 20-odd years.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite members to debate the item in respect of a material planning consideration relevant to the application. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I think officers have got this right. I don't think this has been marketed at all right. I think the fact that David can still take us out and buy us all a drink at the end of the evening, it shouldn't be. We can't be losing a community asset. I think David's got this one absolutely right, and quicker we go to a vote on this one, the less time we'll be spending on it. Thank you.
Councillor French.
Yeah, I totally agree with I'm more than happy to second that. Totally agree. You know, if this person has bought it just in the hope of getting planning permission, it is a pub, it is a facility. I don't believe there's that many left in Whittlesey, and we have to try to preserve what is already there.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with those comments. I don't think anything's been done to try and demonstrate it's not unviable, and as such we need to protect community assets. There's too many closing down across the country at an alarming rate, and therefore I believe the officer's recommendation is appropriate.
Any further questions?
just to agree with what the three have said.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, members. Does any officer have any points of clarification? Okay. As mentioned previously, I will be initially looking for a proposer to go with officer's recommendation to refuse planning permission. Do I have a proposer for this recommendation? Councillor Benny. Do I have a seconder for this recommendation? Councillor French. We will now go to the vote. If you support the proposal to go with officer's recommendation, please raise your hand.
That's a unanimous decision. Councillor Gershon is not taking part.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. The decision has been agreed for refuse. Thank you. Okay. I will now hand over to David Rowan to present application FYR 220510, agenda item number 6.
Thank you, Chairman. Initially, just draw members' attention to the update report that's been circulated in respect of this item. So the application is an outline application with matters committed in respect of access only to erect up to 36 dwellings land to the west of 12 Knights End Road in March. The site is shown in red on the location plan and the aerial image. It is accessed, which says a committed matter, from Knights End Road through an already approved site for 9 dwellings. For slightly wider context, the site is shown with the red star here, so you can see it is adjacent to the built form of the settlement and also forms part of the West March strategic allocation in the local plan and therefore the associated adopted broad concept plan. As part of the BCP, this was the approved parameters plan. So the site is shown here in the context of this. The site is basically the very sort of bottom right-hand corner. You can see it's identified within this for residential use and with a potential link to the wider site to the west. The application as submitted includes a development framework plan illustrating how the site could connect to the wider development to the west, with the two sort of purple arrows, as well as showing the access through the consented site to the east. And then a proposed illustrative layout has also been submitted, showing in a little bit more detail how the site could be developed out. There are certain elements of this that are considered to be a little bit tight in terms of the actual relationships that are shown here, but ultimately it shows that broadly the site could be developed for the quantum of units proposed in a manner that may be difficult to resist at a more detailed stage. So photographs of the site are now on screen. Photos 1 and 3 on the left-hand side of the slide show where the access will be brought through the site from Knights End Road, and then photographs 2 and 4 on the right-hand side show the more general nature of the wider site. So to summarise, the application is considered to comply with the relevant planning policies, including showing how it could tie into the wider development of the strategic allocation. There are no technical objections to the application, and it is considered that the illustrative layout broadly indicates a development that could be brought forward in an acceptable manner. A Section 106 agreement is proposed, which would deliver 25% affordable housing, which is compliant with the local plan policy rather than the 20% delivery envisaged by the local plan viability report, and also £2,000 per market dwelling towards infrastructure. This is considered to be acceptable. Consequently, the officer recommendation is to grant the application subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement as set out within the update report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. We have one speaker on this application. I would like to invite Andrew Hodgson, the agent, to make his presentation to the committee. Mr. Hodgson, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason to just come up here today is just to answer any questions that the members might have about the scheme, because obviously we're delighted with the officer's recommendation. The reason we're at committee today is because of the objection that was made by March Town Council. We tried to liaise with them outside of this committee, but it's worth just looking at the 2 points they raised. One point was overdevelopment, I think they mentioned. Obviously, this is an allocated site for housing, and we've developed it at a scale which would feel is appropriate for the scheme. Obviously, that will be subject to further review at the detail stage for reserve matters. The other point they made was about the access, but that access is already approved through the previous scheme for 9 units on the site. So that is already established and obviously been signed off by the Highways Authority. So it was just really those 2 points. The site itself has an existing quite established boundary, so it made sense to develop it in the way it's been developed, as not part of the wider BCP area, but to have its own access in. So that has resulted in no hedgerows or anything being lost. And we've got 2 nice links through, pedestrian links only, through to the Persimmon site to the west there. So those pink arrows there are for pedestrian and cycle links only. And the projected new school is just there. So actually that will provide quite a nice link through from people living in this estate through to that school when it actually finally built. And obviously it preserves any, we didn't want to have any vehicular access through there because it would cause a bit of a rat run through the Persimmon estate out this way. So this is the best way to do it, and that's where. And in terms of the affordable housing is at 25%, because obviously we also have Cannon Kirk, the applicant, also control the 9 units, which is about to start on site. Just a couple of things to resolve on that next door. So cumulatively, the 25% makes up the total amount of affordable units we should have provided across both sites. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgson. I would now like to invite members to put questions to Mr. Hodgson. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Councillor French.
Thank you. Not a question, but I'm delighted that you're actually offering 25%, where you could actually get away with 20%. So I would say well done.
Councillor Hudson.
Yes, on the affordable housing mix, will they be distributed evenly throughout the project and not just placed in one place?
Sorry, can you just use your microphone, please? Thank you.
Apologies, yes. Yeah, the affordable units are shown on that indicative layout. I think the reserve matters layout is going to be very similar to what you've shown there, because we've actually plotted on the actual Cannon Kirk house types onto that layout, so you can pretty much assume it's going to be very similar to that. And we've got 2 areas of affordable housing you can see on there.
Any further questions? No, thank you. I would like to invite members to put questions to officers. Councillor French.
Thank you. Yes. Having been on this committee for many, many years, off and on, I think the last 24, I don't believe I've ever seen a condition 21, which is on this application, removing permitted development rights on an outline planning application. I think that's totally unfair. That means somebody who wants to put a greenhouse, a shed, they have to go for full planning permission. I think it's a totally and utterly unreasonable condition. Can David tell me why you want to do this?
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. I mean, the condition would be required because, as I indicated, some of the relationships are potentially a little bit on the tight side. However, given that it is an outline application, we have reconsidered that, and as set out within the update report, we feel that at this stage that condition can be removed, albeit it is a matter which may be revisited as part of the reserve matters consideration when we've got a more detailed scheme in front of us.
And what about condition 15? Is it 15 and 21?
Condition 15 was a condition requested by the Highway Authority to prevent residential access as being blocked off by gates to the detriment of highway safety. It is a condition that gets used on sort of large-scale developments on quite a regular basis, and will have been included on probably most of the large-scale residential schemes that have come in front of the committee over the past sort of few years. So it's considered that is necessary, albeit with a slight amendment to the wording of that, again, as set out within the update report.
Any further questions? Councillor Booth.
Just one question. Councillor French said that it was only 20% affordable housing requirement, but I think having looked at the March neighbourhood plan, it does say 25%. So is it not at 25%?
No, it is 25%, but they could get away with 20.
But if it's part of the March neighbourhood plan, then the requirement would be 25% because it becomes a equal standing planning policy. Is that correct?
I think it can come back, I'm sure David will agree, they could actually go for a viability assessment.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, the 2014 local plan had a 25% target within it. The neighbourhood plan subsequently came along and was consistent with that. As part of the emerging local plan, a viability report was undertaken, which concluded that south of the A47, roughly 20% affordable housing delivery was viable. That has been sort of consistently treated as a material planning consideration, probably over the last sort of 18 months, giving it a more up-to-date position. So if this application had come forward with 20% only, we would probably be in a position where we were unable to resist that.
Thank you for the clarity.
Any further questions?
Excuse me, I don't know the area that well. I see this. Can I ask where the nearest play area is for children?
Through you, Chairman, as it stands at the moment, it's probably further round back up the avenue, but this is part of the wider sort of development of this site, and as part of the wider development of the strategic allocation, there will be sort of play areas within that. So as it stands at the moment, there's not a play area kind of within the immediate vicinity, but if everything comes to fruition with the wider development of the site, then there will be.
Councillor Purser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to answer my colleague's question there, I used to live in Knights End, very, very close to this area. And as I understand it, as we used to use it in those days, there's actually a little footpath that goes between this little area in Knights End and got on on Knights End in the corner there, which actually goes directly to the park, the rec as we used to call it, down the avenue. So it's like a little 200 yards dirt track. The kids always used to go down there. So there is actually that unofficial facility, but there's a facility there.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you, everybody. I would now like to invite members to debate the item in respect of material planning consideration relevant to the application. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. Yeah, again, with this one, officers have got this rate. I welcome the 25% affordable housing and the contributions that are in line with the emerging local plan. And there is very little to say. It's an outline application. We may get more details of where everything will be in the reserve matters application that follows. So I think with this one again, unless members have got any burning desire to sit and talk this one around for 20-30 minutes, this is another one we could just have a vote on and support. I can't see anything that would be detrimental or any reason to turn this one down.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, I'll support Councillor Benny. I mean, the reason this before is because of the comments of March Town Council. One of those regarding highways, we've got highways officer report which basically goes against that, and then the other point is about overdevelopment, but it's part of the broad concept plan for this area. So I don't think we've got a policy that would support refusal. So yeah, I believe we should support it.
Councillor French.
Yeah, to be fair, and I understand what you're saying, Gavin. Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure which way, the new members of Marchtown Council made that decision without realising it was a BCP already in place. Plus the fact they made that decision, there's applications been in since 2021 without any planning training.
Councillor Purser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, come back to my other point there. I know that having lived down this area for many years ago as a teenager, a little while ago, about 10 years ago, there's a bungalow on the corner there, and my concern was originally that had the entrance gone down on the right-hand side of the bungalow, right at that junction, to me it would have been quite concerned, but it's obviously been moved around a bit, which actually takes the concern out of it. I also noted, looking at the information there, that there were terms that were actually put to the applicant originally, and the applicant's actually agreed to that in writing. So I think that's very positive for this application. Thank you.
Councillor Hurst.
Again, sorry, clarification. I see that the affordable housing has 9 two-bed units. Is that normal, not to have just 2-bed units, or? I mean, you're a bit restricted with the number of children you can put in a 2-bed unit. So they're all 2-bed units.
Through you, Chairman, it's an outline application at the moment, so we've not got any details of house types or layout or any of those details committed in front of us. Ultimately, we would be guided by sort of our housing team as to the appropriate mix that's required. However, I think it's perhaps fair to say that given this council's success rate in delivering affordable units, we will perhaps take 9 two-bed units rather than nothing, shall we say?
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, members. Does any officer have any points of clarification? Okay. I will be initially looking for a proposer to go with the officer's recommendation to grant planning permission. Do I have a proposer for this recommendation? Councillor Purser. Do I have a seconder? Councillor French. We will now go to the vote. If you support the proposal to go with officer's recommendation, please raise your hand.
It's a unanimous decision, Chairman.
That motion has been passed. Thank you. I will now hand over to David Rowan to present FYR 22-014/F, agenda item number 7.
Chair, I'll leave the room for this item.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. So initially draw members' attention to the update report that's been circulated. So this is a full planning application to change the use of equestrian land and stables to a builder's yard with office, including erection of aggregate bays, 2.4 metre high fence and sliding gates, formation of a swale, and extend the existing access. And this application is retrospective, or at least in part retrospective. The location of the site is land south and west of Beats Lodge, Hooks Drove and Murrow. So the application site is located within the open countryside on Hooks Drove, shown in red on the images on the screen. The site was previously used as equestrian land, and that's sort of visible on the aerial image there. And also, as you can see, there are several dwellings sort of within the immediate vicinity of the site. The site is also within flood zone 3. So the site has been utilised for a period of time as a builder's yard, the layout of which is shown on the site plan. Essentially, this is a yard with aggregate bays, which are shown in the sort of middle of the cream image there. An existing building to the front of the site is to be utilised, which is sort of the L-shaped white block, just adjacent to the green area to the left-hand side of the image. And then to the south of the site, or the right of this image, an attenuation pond is proposed with a connection to the adjacent north level drain sitting at the right-hand side of the plan there. As sort of indicated within the earlier sort of discussion of this item at item 3, a previous application for planning permission to the County Council for this development was deemed to be a county matter as it involved the processing of waste, and say that sort of issue is ongoing. So details of the access arrangements are shown here, existing and proposed. The sort of existing, or should we say pre-existing, is shown on the upper image, and then the proposed are shown on the lower. And again, the details of the existing outbuilding are shown here, and sort of how that would be sort of utilised. And then the next couple of slides all show details of some of the other elements of the development that are proposed. Moving on to photographs of the site, which are shown here. So on the upper left image, that is the building I referred to previously. And then as you can see, the access running sort of from the sort of round the side of that bit of a compound and then through to a yard at the back. And then we've just got some street view images here which show how the frontage of the site has changed over time. So the upper image is from 2011, while the lower is from earlier this year. So to summarise, the site is within an elsewhere location within the settlement hierarchy of the local plan, where certain developments only should be allowed. This development does not fall within one of the listed exemptions and is therefore unacceptable in principle. The Council's environmental health team have objected to the application on the basis of the impact on neighbouring residents, and it is also considered by the Highway Authority that the highway infrastructure in the vicinity of the site is not of sufficient quality to adequately serve the development, combined with its remote location. Additionally, the site is located within flood zone 3, and no sequential test has been submitted to demonstrate that no sites are available at a lower risk of flooding. The application is therefore recommended for refusal as set out within the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. We have one speaker on this application and one written representation. Firstly, I would like to ask Member Services to present the written representation from Debbie Fryett, who is in support of this application. Jo.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear Sirs, following my initial letter of support, I write to inform you I remain very strongly in favour of this planning application. The applicants are native to the village of Murrow rather than someone from outside the local area moving in. Some of the negative issues raised I find almost amusing and think the Planning Committee and local residents should take into consideration the number of businesses already operating within the vicinity of Hooksgrove as listed below. Ostrich Farm, Doggy Daycare Centre, originally ABC Meats, now a meat packing factory, a hot tub business and farming agricultural activity. Regarding the point raised re Hooksgrove being unsuitable for heavy traffic and heavy goods vehicles, I have lived in Murrow in excess of 30 years and to my knowledge there is no visible signage anywhere suggesting unsuitability. 99% of the time the applicant uses Hooksgrove, Longdrove and Cantsgrove as their preferred route of travel, as do Adapt Biogas, which is also the Cambridgeshire County Council preferred route. There is already continuous movement of lorries, tractors, general farm machinery and trailers constantly using the very same route between 6 AM up to and including 10 PM 7 days a week. There are daily deliveries to the existing businesses in Hooksgrove. One final important point to note is to also consider if the encroachment of Cambridgeshire County Council land were to be removed, it would greatly improve the situation for all concerned. In summary, I emphatically feel that Fenland District Council should approve this application and allow another local business to develop and prosper, particularly given the current financial climate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jo. I would now like to invite Matthew Hall, the agent, to make his presentation to the committee. Mr. Hall, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report states, as David said, that this land was previously Grade 1 agricultural land. The applicant has advised me that the site has not been used for agricultural farming for at least 20 years. Since 2015, there has been a stable block and a menage over part of this site, which can clearly be seen on Google Maps. There would have been horse boxes visiting this site. This site was overgrown when the applicant moved in, and the menage was overgrown, and there was permission for 8 floodlights, which is not required as part of this proposal. Mr. Chapman, as we've just heard, was born in Murrow and has lived in Murrow his whole life with his family. Mr. Chapman has also driven lorries for a living to provide for his family and has purchased grab lorries and various plant for his business. This site is in flood zone 3, as David Rowan has said, but the Environment Agency have not raised any objection and we're not building any buildings at all. The applicant applied for a lorry operator's licence before moving on this site 3 years ago, and this is still in place. The site does not have members of the public visiting to purchase goods. All materials are delivered to site. Lorries are stored on site and they leave the site to carry out deliveries and work on sites, and waste from sites is taken to Saxon Pit. The applicant carries out emergency work on utilities where there may be burst mains, as well as private work, as well as work for contractors and homeowners by taking muck away, delivering aggregates. Cambridgeshire County Council Highways are now satisfied with the proposed access position of the gates, visibility displays on both directions. Following details from our highways consultant, a speed survey was also carried out and submitted to Cambridgeshire County Council Highways. Along this same stretch of road, as we've just heard, there is the London Hallam Meat Company, which was originally ABC Meats, which has been in existence for approximately 35 years. There are HGVs which enter and exit that site, and the applicant advises me that there are approximately 5 heavy goods vehicles a day go to that site. This site is surrounded by vegetation which is all to be maintained. The area for the grab lorries and aggregate bays cannot be seen from the street scene. There is local support for this application. 26 letters have been submitted from persons in Murrah. In this area, as we've seen on the map, there are 5 dwellings. One of them is lived in by the applicants. 3 of them have not objected. There is one objection from neighbouring property. Having looked at that, where the grab lorries are shown to park and air drawing, the nearest point to that dwelling would be 50 metres away. Where we've shown on air drawing to put aggregate bays, they'd be approximately 90 metres away from that neighbouring property. On looking at the reason for refusal of this application, the site is located in flood zone 3, but we're not proposing to build any buildings, and the Environment Agency, who have been consulted on this application, have not objected. Elsewhere location, Murrah is classed as a small village in the local plan, normally limited to small business opportunities. This is a business opportunity. Cambridgeshire County Council Highways, they've confirmed, as I've said, the access and visibility displays are satisfactory, but are concerned with regards to a lack of footpath and passing places. However, there are other businesses located down Hooksdrove, Longdrove and Canstrove. As we've just heard, this business would not be in isolation. The applicant has been running his business since 2016 and has been an lorry operator's licence for 3 years, which he still has. It is in flood zone 3, but we're not proposing to build any buildings. There are already buildings located off Hooksdrove, Longdrove and Canstrove. The yard cannot be seen from the street scene, and we're told Fenland is open for business, and this is a business application. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite members to put questions to Mr Hall. If you would like to ask a question, please could you raise your hand? Councillor French.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. You just mentioned that he's been running this business since 2016, 7 years. How come it's only just come to light on this planning application?
Previously, he was at a yard at Whittlesea Road in March West, and he was given notice from there and has moved from there to here. Yep.
That's good, sir.
Thank you. In our notes here, it states about external lighting. Has the applicant given consideration to the lighting in the area?
When I was with the applicant yesterday, that was talked about. We haven't proposed any external lighting, but we'd be happy to take a condition so that can be agreed with officers, but we've not put in for any external lighting, no. But we can agree that with officers, yeah. Thank you.
How many vehicles does he have on his operator's licence? And is it just rigids or is it Arctics?
I believe the licence is for 5. I've seen 4 vehicles there, all with rigid axles. I believe the licence is just for rigid axles, but I'm not 100% sure on that point.
And that's been for the last 3 years?
Correct.
Thank you. Any further questions, Mr Hall? Okay, thank you.
Oh, cannot say anything else.
What would you like to...
Mr. Rowan
Sorry.
contacted me about 12:30. I could add maybe a bit of
Okay, sorry.
clarification, but
No,
if I
I
can't.
think we'll call that day. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, I would like to invite members to put questions to officers. Any questions for officers? No? Okay. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite members to debate the item in respect of any material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Councillor Benny.
Fine. Seeing if anyone else would kick it off, but no. I mean, I look at this as a solid business application. You know, I read the report and I've read it over and over again, and truly, a lot of these have been the reasonings of this have been dealt with in other applications of a similar nature. You cannot put a lorry yard with aggregates in the middle of a town. This is the place for something to be. My biggest concern in all of this was LP16E, which is the adverse impact on neighbours. But really, you've got only one neighbour complaining. You know, you're 100, Mr. Hall said 100 metres away. I mean, that is 100 metres. If you were in a town, Travis Perkins' yard backs right up to houses in Chatteris. That's an industrial yard. That's got lorries going in and out of it. And we've got 100 metres here, which is far, far more than you'd have in a town. And really, anybody who wants to go and live in the middle of the fen has got to accept noise, dust. Well, there's a cornfield next door to this site, and anyone who's ever lived on a farm will know that in the summer when you want your windows open, you sellotape them up because of the dust that comes from the combine and drilling of the land, you get a fen blow. So anybody who chooses to live in the middle of nowhere cannot really complain about dust and vehicle movements either. I look here, we've also got the anabolic digester, which is not a million miles away. I mean, the one at Chatteris is fed by, you know, fast track lorries running on red diesel to provide green energy for, you know, us as residents. And there's going to be an anabolic digester here that's going to be fed by tractors and vehicle movements there, which the few vehicle movements you're going to get from this site is dwarfed by the amount of vehicle movements you're going to get from the anabolic digester when that's up and running. Myself and Councillor French did go and have a look at this the other day. We had a drive around, did our site inspections and had a McDonald's on the way around. We drove down Hooks Drove, and there are passing paces down there. And to me, to ask for passing paces here, we drove past Paul Tibbitt's glass. That was one of the signs we saw. We went past ABC Meats. Well, ABC Meats do all the markets in this area doing meat. I mean, they have lorries. Those lorries are in and out. They must be in and out all the time. If not, they wouldn't be sustainable. There are plenty of other businesses in this area, and this is just another business that fits very well in this area. And you know, I look at it, and you know, the members of the public must look at this and think, what is going on? Having a refusal on this one. To me, this is a solid business application that employs people, brings jobs, brings council tax into Fenland, helps pay our expenses. Thank you very much. You know, I really see that there is the neighbour. The neighbour is the only concern here, but when you look at it, there's a cornfield there that will be having dust and all the noise from that. It's on a road. A few more lorries is not going to make the difference. I really think that this is a solid application. It's a business. We're supposed to be open for business. We are, as a council, supposed to be, you know, looking to drive economic growth and benefits and support local business. And we've got a business here that needs support. I really think this is a solid application. I would be supporting this application today. I'd just be very interested to see what other members say.
Councillor Purser.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I had made quite a few notes on this one, had a look at it myself and what have you, but I have to say that most of the notes and things I actually made, Councillor Bennett's already mentioned, so I can sort of verify on that. It's actually creating work and the likes. As far as things like they've mentioned about the smells, that's something from industrial burning, what have you. I think it's actually mentioned there that it has previously been an equestrian centre. Now, not being funny, but I don't know much about horses, but I do know they make quite a lot of smells and things. So what's the difference? You know, as far as I'm concerned, it's going from one smell like that to another smell. And it's actually out in the middle of nowhere anyway, so there's no complaints from anybody. I feel we can fully support this. As I said as well, that, you know, creating the work there, I think it's got to be supported.
Councillor Gessner.
Thank you. Fully support Councillor Benny. I think conditions should be placed in it about the lighting from the police report, and also conditions about the opening hours and closing hours. I think that has would be allowed because of the amenity to the residents. No one lorries going up and down there all times of day and night, but as we've already said, there are already trucks going up and down there. That may be difficult if the other applicants don't have conditions put on them, but just an idea. Thank you.
Councillor French.
Thank you. Yes, we did go down there on Monday, and there certainly is passing places, because we did encounter one of these vehicles actually coming down and turning in there. It is in the middle of nowhere. I have to say, it took us quite a long time to actually find it. We were up and down the road. We just didn't know where it was, but we did find it. And it, you know, it is the ideal place to go. And, you know, we're talking about dust and everything. As Councillor Benny said, if you live in the fence, expect it. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to go out and combine the harvest, and I have never seen such dust. I was absolutely amazed at what these farmers have to do. And no doubt that will happen over there. We're only going to get 5 lorries roughly a day. If they get, obviously it depends how busy they are. I don't see much of a problem there. The roads are not wonderful, but then County Council's roads in Fenland are not wonderful anywhere. But that's a different story for a different day. Totally agree with Councillor Benny. It is a business. I'm glad they moved out of Whittlesea Road in March, because that was an absolute eyesore. So I think this is the right place.
Thank you. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Roy over there in terms of opening hours, but if, I believe Matthew Hall said that they do utility work, and with utility work, that can be in the middle of the night. If you have a breakdown, I say it's an electricity, for want of a better word, have a cable break, they need a grab lorry to take the muck away, and that can be at any time. I think to put restrictions on that would be restricting the business in terms of utility, because the utilities do need to go when they need to go. You wouldn't have lorries, from what little I know about utility work, but that isn't where you'd be out every day of the week. You are out when you are called. So you would need to find something. If not, you're restricting that business that we're trying to help. I think general opening hours would be a reasonable thing, but for utilities, I think that needs to be a fairly open part of a condition, because if not, that will be restricting the business. If he's got a contract to do for Godfrey's or Murphy's or whoever the utility company is, if he says, well, I can only come till 6 o'clock, I can't come after that, he won't have that contract for very long. And that is what this job is entailing. So I think that is something that we should be careful on putting too many restrictions on that to hinder and restrict the business. That would be my only concern on that one.
Any further debate? Councillor Purser.
Yeah, can I just add, I think I have to say that I totally and utterly agree with what Councillor Benny just said on that. I think it's a very, very fair point. Very fair point.
Okay, just, I know the area. One of our customers used to be ABC Meats, which has recently been sold to another company. I know the lorry movements they had down there. Obviously, there's been an operator's licence. This gentleman has an operator's licence for 5 lorries. if they've been working for the last 3 years with no complaints, because one thing, Vosa would have been straight round there had there been issues, and that would have been noted. So it doesn't seem as though there is any issues regarding vehicle movements and stuff. I would be very mindful of putting any restrictions on times going in and out of the place. What we think is reasonable, other sort of people don't. So, and remembering also, you've probably got horse boxes and stuff going up and down there as well from neighbouring properties. So, yeah, no, I would support this application. However, I would just be very mindful regarding any time limits being put on or opening hours. I would just leave, I wouldn't put anything on it personally. Any further debate? Okay, thank you. Members, does any officers have any points of clarification? David.
Thank you, through you, Chairman. I think just to, I suppose, perhaps potentially push back almost on some of the points that have been made in terms of the sites in the middle of nowhere. We've got a plan on the screen here that clearly shows residential dwellings in the immediate vicinity. It's clearly not in the middle of nowhere. We've got, I think, 4 letters of objection from address points along Buxgrove Murrow, so people who are sort of in the immediate vicinity or more immediate vicinity of the site, shall we say, are raising concerns. And with respect to amenity, most importantly, the council's environmental health team have objected to the application as well. So they are flagging up the potential for fairly serious amenity impacts arising from the application. And in addition to those impacts, you've also got the Highway Authority who've raised concerns about the application and its and whether this is an appropriate location for this type of activity and the size and nature of vehicles involved. So I suppose I say this with respect to the committee. There's a question mark, I think, or a question that I think you've potentially got to sort of ask yourselves as a committee is, are you suitably qualified to go against the professional advice of environmental health and highways? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, if I could come back on one point there, and you may be able to help us. When you have an O licence operating centre given, part and parcel of that is highways input regarding number of vehicle movements coming in off sites, and it's suitable. Obviously, this was given 3 years ago. Why now all of a sudden should we now be saying that it's not suitable?
I'm afraid I don't know the ins and outs of vehicle licensing regimes. All I can comment on, and ultimately the only issue that this committee is dealing with, is that of land use planning. And you've got a comment here from the Highway Authority basically saying, we object to this application, this isn't a suitable location.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Benny, thank you.
To say that we're unqualified to make this decision, this is the process. Officer's job, write reports, answer questions, offer information. Members make the decision. This is our job. And we receive training for this. This is what we train for. This is why we stand the councillors. This is why we are here. And to say that we're not qualified, we may not have a degree in planning, but we are here to represent the people of Fenland. And therefore that means we are qualified to say this. I think that that's a fairly strong term to use, that we're not qualified. This is our job, to make these decisions. All delegated decisions are made on behalf of this committee. So I think that's maybe a little bit harsh, that one, but let that be where that one be. Ultimately, we are the decision makers. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have anything you wish to add to that, David?
Thank you, through you, Chairman. The point I was making was that the committee has got particular professional advice, not from planning officers, but from specialists in terms of noise, dust, amenity issues with environmental health, and also professional experts in terms of highway safety. They provide the council, the committee, with that advice. If members wish to go against that, clearly that is in your gift to do so. But obviously they are the professional experts, and all I would recommend that the committee does is listen to what they are saying.
Okay, any further points? No. As I mentioned previously, I will be initially looking for a proposer to go with officer's recommendation to refuse planning permission. Do I have a proposer for this recommendation? No? Okay. Can I therefore ask for a different proposal? Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to propose that we go against officer's recommendation for this. My reasons are, it's LP3, which is building them in the open countryside, but we're not actually building anything. There's no lives at risk here. There is nothing. We're not building anything. All we're doing is putting some bays up and marking out some areas for vehicles to park in. So I don't think that there is any threat to life, which is where this is, where the building in the open countryside and ruining the open countryside. LP16E, I think that the distance away from the neighbouring property to the actual working part of this site is sufficient. As an example, we have Travis Perkins in Chatteris, which has back gardens that back up to their site where they've got lorries running, and that seems to they've been passed and approved. So I think that that's an acceptable part of it. A more sustainable transport network. Well, how do you get a sustainable transport in a rural area? The people who work there are never going to come to work on a bike. We don't need a cycle lane down there, which would cost hundreds of thousands of pounds for somebody to never use it. We live in a rural area. Cars and vehicles are part of this. This is not. We're looking at a business here, which is, it's been there since 2016. It looks like it's doing fairly well. It will probably grow. It may even outgrow the site and it may move, but who knows? And when it comes to reason 4, policy 14 of the Fenland local plan, building in flood zone 3, we're not actually building anything. We're not building anything. All we're doing is looking at a lorry yard. So any soil that is taken to the site will only be put on top of soil that is already there. And I'm sure it won't object to being underwater for long if it is. So again, I really feel that the reasons here are can be mitigated against, or that they are the overall project overrules these reasons for that.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy with those reasons?
No, the only thing I would add, excuse me, in terms of buildings, I believe there are bays being constructed, aggregate bays being constructed.
Yep.
Marked on the plan. So technically they are buildings in terms of planning law. I appreciate they're not houses or offices, but they are buildings, just for information.
Thank you, Stephen.
Councillor French.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to pick up something that David said earlier about us not being qualified and going against our professional Fenland District Council Environmental Health. In view of this, I firmly object to this application on the grounds that the change of use will cause an unreasonable loss of amenity to nearby residents. What does that mean? What's it got to do? They're not taking land away from the residents. I just find that obscure.
Would you like to respond, David?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I mean, loss of amenity refers to, as they've indicated in the first part of that sentence or paragraph, permit the introduction of industrial processing to close proximity in a rural location with low background noise levels. So the inference from that would be that environmental health have got concerns about the noise that would be generated by the development and the resultant loss in the amenity of nearby residents and when enjoying their property.
Thank you. But we're talking about 100 metres away.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Do I have a seconder for the proposal? Councillor French. We will now go to the vote. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Say again.
Through you, Chairman, is that with delegation to officers on conditions, Councillor Benny?
I'd like to have a look at the conditions before, please, and I think the Chairman would, on my second level as well.
Yes.
Please.
Okay, if you support the new proposal, please raise your hand.
That's a unanimous decision, Chairman.
Okay. Yep, thank you. Okay, I will now hand over to David Rowan to present FYR 221084F, agenda item number 8.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for the siting of a mobile home for residential use and the erection of an ancillary day room, land southwest of 92 High Street, Chatteris. So the application site sits to the rear of High Street within the Chatteris Conservation Area, as shown on the location plan and aerial photo. The site is within an established residential area, as you can see from those images. So the application seeks to use the land for residential purposes, involving the siting of a mobile home and the erection of a day room, as shown on the site plan. At present, the site appears to be something of a wasteland, for the want of a better description, and there have been two previous refusals of planning permission on the site for the erection of dwellings. So details of the proposed day room are shown here. And then photos of the site are now shown on screen. So the upper left image shows the view north from the access road at its junction with High Street. The upper right image shows the rear boundary of the site. The lower right shows the view south on High Street from the access road, while the lower left image shows the view sort of back down the access road towards High Street. And then a couple of photos just showing the view sort of within the site. So the application is submitted as being for residential use of the site, with a case being put forward that the applicant qualifies as a gypsy or traveller under the definition contained within the National Planning Policy for Traveller Sites. This has been assessed, and as the report sets out, barrister advice has been taken on this, with the conclusion being that this is not the case, and as such that there are no grounds to balance against any harm arising from the development. The Highway Authority have objected to the application, as they have with previous proposals on the site, due to the limited visibility at the junction of the access with both pedestrians and vehicles. Additionally, the driveway length would require bins to be carried 45 metres in excess of the recap guidelines, and would therefore result in a poor living environment for future residents. It is also considered that the application is at odds with the aim of preserving or enhancing the conservation area. Consequently, the officer recommendation is to refuse the application as set out within the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. We have one speaker on this application and one written representation. Firstly, I would like to ask Member Services to present the written representation from Jodie Chittock, a supporter of the application, and I would like to ask Member Services to please read this out.
Thank you, Chairman. I am Jodie Chittock. I am the direct neighbour and only neighbour to 84B. I live in 84A. I understand that planning permission keeps getting denied for my neighbours, and I feel that you are not understanding the impact, this is having on my family. So I'll explain. I suffer extreme anxiety and panic attacks. My property is perfect for me as it is out of the way. Now, this last year or more, my anxiety has been worse, and I feel unsettled in my home because if Mr. and Mrs. Steer are not granted approval, they will sell the land and it will come with no planning permission. So the person who buys the land will probably use it as a dumping ground or scrapyard or something very undesirable. I also fear whoever buys it will most certainly not be respectful to my family and will keep going up and down at a great speed to get to their land, putting my children who play at risk. This is a massive worry to me and my husband. Whoever will buy is most certainly will use the land for their own pleasure and not have any cares for the surrounding properties. Yet you have a lovely family who currently own it, who just want to settle there and have a place to call home. I can honestly say they are respectful. They typically park on the road, so rarely do you see any cars drive past my property, so our children can be out the gate playing on their bikes and stuff. They've improved the land in my eyes and keep it all looking lovely. Even the drive we share is kept nice and tidy. You truly can't ask for better people to be your neighbours. Their kids and mine play together and have become really good friends. I don't think what they are asking for is unreasonable, so please, when you make your decisions on this case, please take my family into consideration because it is affecting us too. I give my full support for the application as a direct neighbour to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I would now like to invite Mr. Nat Green, the agent, to make his representation to the committee. Mr. Green, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Nathaniel Green from Green Planning Studio, and I'm speaking on behalf of our client, Mrs. Steer, in support of this application. And the residents, I have to say, are present here today. And this committee is here to decide the matter on planning issues only, as this application is for the siting of a mobile home for residential use and the siting of an ancillary day room. This application is recommended for refusal. However, the officer's report and its recommendation before you has deep flaws. First, the dismissal of our client's gypsy status. Despite a comprehensive family history and personal circumstances, the LPA claims that a barrister's opinion was sought and it was concluded that they weren't gypsies. But where is that barrister's opinion? At the very least, it should have been released to our client. If a report was written about you, you would want to see it. And where is the report from the Gypsy and Traveller Liaison Officer? In any event, as Fenland Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year land supply of traveller pitches, and indeed has a shortfall of 5 pitches to 2026, personal circumstances are actually irrelevant to the application in front of you. You need gypsy pitches, and here is one such, and a very sustainable one too. After all, if it subsequently turns out that the residents are not gypsies, that's a second-order problem. This is an application for the use of the land. This is not an application about the residents. Moving on to the official reasons for refusal. Access. Green Planning Studios submitted a 51-page report by the Hurlstone Partnership 10 months ago on the 12th of October. It's on the Council's planning portal. Clearly it supports our case, and we invited the Highways Department through the case officer to comment on it. They refused. That is why there's no reference to it in the officer's report. Councillors may wish to read that report. It is one thing to have a professional difference of an opinion, but quite another to demonstrate a cavalier dismissal of a thoroughly argued report. And this amounts to a material consideration that has not been addressed, and it won't look good at appeal. Looking at the historic environment reason, it's recommended for refusal because it would build across 2 medieval burgage plots. In and of itself, that might be a valid reason. But last year, just 8 doors up, 6 houses were passed to be built across the burgage plots. In that application, and that is your designation, YR210871, the case officer states, the development would result in the loss of the burgage plots in this location, which would amount to less than substantial harm to the historic environment. However, the benefits of introducing 6 dwellings in this highly sustainable location, which is well connected to the town centre and nearby services and facilities, coupled with the improvement that the development would make to the area, both in terms of visual impacts through the reuse of a currently disused and unkept area of land, are considered to outweigh this harm. So, presumably what is good for the goose should be good for the gander, and it won't look good at appeal either. Finally, the third reason, bin storage. Officers want you to refuse this application because bins would have to be dragged for an extra 15 metres beyond the recommended distance of 30 metres. Councillors may wish to know that the bins for the application site are already collected by a council refuse vehicle every week, along with everyone else's at 82, 84 and 86A, as it travels up and down the lane. And this was confirmed in an email to the case officer on the 21st of October in 2022. To conclude, it is understandable for a committee to generally follow officers' recommendations, but no one has a monopoly over being right, and in this instance there are sufficient flaws in this report to suggest that you should approve this application, subject to the usual Gypsy and Traveller site conditions. My client would be happy to comply with any reasonable condition imposed. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite members to put questions to Mr. Green. If you would like to ask a question, please could you raise your hand? Councillor Booth.
Thank you. So with regards to the sort of Gypsy and Traveller status, you're saying that you've not seen the report, but I'm assuming that you provided evidence as part of the application which was provided. Were you asked for additional evidence to support the claim or not?
We submitted a family history and full personal circumstances to the case officer.
But you did not provide any additional information, or was no additional information requested? No additional information was requested. Right, okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Green, if I heard it correctly, did you say that the council already collects the bin from their property?
That's correct.
So how long have the occupants lived at the property? If they live there already?
They do live there already, yes.
How long have they lived there, please?
I can't tell you precisely how many years they've actually lived there, but it is some years, yes.
Thank you.
Right. Regarding access, I drive that road most days going in and out of Chatteris, and I've had a look at where that is, and it is quite a concern. Last week or the week before, there was a discovery that had been, a Freelander car that had been hit there, and I know of at least 2 other accidents along that stretch of road.
Yes.
There's nothing we can do regarding making the access better, vision display or whatever, and that is my concern regarding this. How many vehicles will they be looking to have on that site?
Maximum of 2.
And as the travellers, and I'm not casting aspersions, will that be transit vans, large vehicles, or just cars?
Right. A standard Gypsy and Traveller condition, assuming you imposed it, would be a maximum of 3.5 tonnes. So you're talking of you're talking nothing more than a transit.
Okay, and they won't be running any business as such from there.
No, and that can also be condition 2.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Sorry, Councillor Booth.
I'm assuming that they're actually using it as a vehicular access anyway at the moment, aren't they? So there's not really going to be any increase in vehicles from
In
what
the
you're saying.
practical sense, no.
Right, okay.
I would now like to invite members to put questions to officers. French.
Thank you. Yeah, I've listened to what Mr. Green said. Can somebody tell me about this report, why we haven't seen a report? Also, looking at 10.3 planning policy for traveller sites, policies and criteria, why haven't we got some kind of information from our own officer, Gypsy officer? You know, we keep coming up with Gypsy sites. I think the last one we had a couple of 2-3 months ago, it was pointed out then we still don't have a policy. Are we ever going to get a policy?
Thank you, Chairman. I think probably 2 issues to pick up. Yes, we still don't have a specific Gypsy and Traveller assessment in place. So from that point of view, there is, as Mr. Green said, sort of an acknowledged position that we have an unknown need for such sites. When we're going to get that, I'll be honest, I don't know. I've not got that information to hand for any sort of timetable at present. In terms of the other issue, because the information that's submitted with the application around personal circumstances, etc., does contain personal circumstances, there's an issue around that in terms of confidentiality, as there would be in terms of the sort of the barrister's advice in respect of that as well. But I think the important thing is that the information that was submitted with the application has been assessed by the barrister, and their conclusion was that did not demonstrate that the applicant met the definition.
If I may come back,
Yes,
yeah, I mean, we've had this before per some circumstances, and it has been given to us under confidentiality, so I'm surprised why it's not been done. But I'm more concerned about not actually seeing this document, this report.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, with regards to the Gypsy and Traveller Housing Needs Assessment, I was told some time ago as part of the local plan working party it would be available on the second public consultation or around the second public consultation. We're obviously not there, and there have been further delays to the local plan. So, you know, it's something that doesn't appear to be being delivered very quickly, much to everyone's concern. I think also I just wanted to pick up on the point, I think Councillor French also asked a question around why we haven't got a report from our officer, and I guess the question is, why did we have to go to a barrister? And also from reading the report, it says there's not sufficient evidence. So you saw the question I asked to the applicant's agent, you know, if there's not sufficient evidence, does that mean to say that it could be rectified if further evidence was provided? You know, obviously it's very careful wording in the report, and that is why I'm asking these questions.
Through Chairman, the reason that barrister advice was sought was so that we were, or the council was, dealing with this in as robust a manner as possible. So to get you know, legal opinion in that respect, to you know, to fully address that matter. In terms of sort of the other elements of that, I don't think I can really elaborate a great deal more on my previous sort of answers in that respect.
Councillor French.
Thank you. Yeah, just to pick up David saying robust, I'm looking at the date. This was, I don't know when it was validated, but it was 2022 number 1084. So I'm assuming that was probably November, December last year. So I don't think 10 months down the line is very robust in doing a planning application. I do have concerns about this, Mr. Chairman. I can see both sides. I sympathise with the applicant. We haven't got this report, and I believe as decision makers we should have this report. I do have concerns with regard to the highway and the access, and I believe this really needs to be deferred, and let us see the report and let us see the confidential information.
Through you, Chairman, clearly if members wish to defer the application, that would be their decision. I would have to revisit the report and the advice that we've received and sort of see what is or isn't disclosable within that. However, if members wish to defer and receive a sort of a confidential paper at a future committee, then that would be a course of action which you could go down.
Sorry.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I do actually, to be fair to the applicant and also to be fair to the committee, I think a deferment is the only thing that we should be looking at this time. Because bear in mind, if we refuse it, they have got the right to appeal, and then, as you know, that takes months. But I think, you know, the application has been in for several months already. Deferring it for 1 month, I can't see any harm in that. Thank you.
David, could we ask, if we deferred it and the report was given to us, would it be given to us in its entirety with the agreement of the applicant, as opposed to having a cut document?
Through you, Chairman, I wouldn't be able to answer that at this point in time. I'm afraid that's one of the issues that would have to be looked at. The sort of I suppose, logistics around that. I don't know if Stephen wants to add anything.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think just to make an observation, this document is effectively legal advice to the council. It is not an external report which informs the public planning process. It's legal advice to officers. And there are very sound reasons why normally those are confidential, because the Freedom of Information Act recognises that public bodies need to have their own legal advice and not have to go public on that advice every time they obtain such advice. So that's the context within which this opinion was obtained. And it may well be that it shouldn't be disclosed other than to members on a confidential basis. The applicant's free to get its own legal advice, and no doubt it possibly has done. So it's a matter of confidential legal advice to the council. That's what we're talking about, not a document that ordinarily would be public, and the law recognises that such documents should be confidential.
Thank you. I believe what we're asking for is just for the committee to be able to see this document. That's from what I'm understanding here. Do we all agree?
I'm more concerned, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that if information has been passed on for the gypsy status, that is not been clarified. And I think it would be wrong for us to make a decision today without having further information, and especially from our own gypsy traveller officer. We do have one, very experienced one, and he will know the answers to this.
Councillor Booth.
And I think just further to that, it's the way the report's worded about sufficient advice. Is there further evidence that can be provided that will clarify the situation? It doesn't appear to be that, from what's been said today, that there's been much engagement with the applicant regarding this issue, and I'm concerned by that. I think, as Councillor French has said, we do have our own officer that should be able to give us an opinion. But I'm a bit concerned with the report on a couple of other matters around, the bins and the vehicular access, because they're already in situ, and we're saying that there are reasons to refuse, but that's already what's occurring on site. So how can we say that there are reasons to refuse if that's an established use that's happening already? So to me, there's quite a few issues with this report that I feel don't put this council in good light, let's put it that way.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. Yeah, certainly the issue of the bins is something that we would have to look at, and I don't have that information to hand at present to give members any advice on that. However, with regards to the issue of the access, if the site is being occupied without planning permission, which seems to be the case, then what we're looking at the moment is an unauthorised situation, and the advice that the Highway Authority have given within the application report would be relevant, because effectively we would be looking at the intensification of the use of a substandard access. I think that's the key issue, whether that's already taking place or whether that is a future occurrence. It's from a highway safety point of view, it's that intensification of the use of a substandard access, and indeed, going back to the photographs, whether essentially that bottom right-hand image and the lack of visibility is acceptable or not. Clearly, the Highway Authority don't think so.
Thank you, David. Any further questions, officers?
Sorry, I just want to ask about this issue of the access. I mean, as we can see from the images, there are other properties in the vicinity, and some of them, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the bottom left corner, that they use the same access, don't they? If it's not an issue for them, why should it be an issue for this site?
Through you, Chairman, as I indicated, it's the intensification. So yes, you may have got that one property utilises the access. In fact, it may even be that the property on the frontage also has an access kind of round the back. So the issue will be the intensification of the use of that access. So you've got a substandard access, which has arisen as a sort of a historic quirk, if you like, and it's whether that can accommodate any further vehicle movements, and would having more vehicle movements up and down that and utilising that substandard visibility pose a risk to highway safety, and clearly the Highway Authority think it would.
I do understand that, sorry, but then what difference would it make if the current users of that access just increase the number of vehicles they had? It would be the same result, wouldn't it?
Through you, Chairman, yes, it potentially would, but you've got to remember that if you then have a sort of a third residential unit accessing down there, and those properties also go and further intensify their own vehicle movements, that cumulatively results in that intensification to the detriment of safety.
We talk about intensification, but then we've heard also that this site has been used, although without the appropriate consents, for some time. So is that actually intensification if it's currently being used? So, and I think that's, I think we need the answers. I think we also need to know how long the applicants have actually been on that site, because that will give us a clear indication of, particularly the highway safety, about how much of a risk it poses. If they've been living there for quite some time, then that would indicate that the risk is probably minimal, because they've been using it as such for some time.
Any further questions for officers? Okay. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite members to debate the item in respect of the material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've debated. I know it was questions, but I think we had the debate as well. I'm going to propose that this application is deferred.
Councillor Purser.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I've been listening to all the debate and my thoughts are going around in my mind, and I was actually thinking exactly the same thing that Councillor Fletcher said, exactly what I was actually thinking in actual fact, so I'd like to second that.
Okay. As we may be looking to defer this, we need to clarify what points we're deferring this for, and also what we want to come back, what are the further information for this deferral. Councillor Booth.
Okay, so there's quite a number of issues here. I think there's the Gypsy and Traveller assessment, the legal guidance that's been provided, or barrister's opinion, I should say. But I think we also need to see if there's further evidence that substantiates the applicant's claim. So there's those two points. I think there's the issue around the bins, which sounds like that should be fairly easy to overcome. We've got this point about the highway access and whether it is potentially an intensification or not, but also I think we need to find out how long the applicant has been on site to give us a clearer indication of what that potential risk is. I think that's probably the main points.
I think that's enough.
Do we need to clarify where the applicant is actually living at present time on site as well?
Let's have the whole story.
Yeah.
But I also think we need to engage with the applicant to try and obtain this information. It sounds like there hasn't been that engagement from what we're hearing today.
And can we have a confidential report on personal circumstances?
So, and we want the Gypsy and Traveller needs officers report as well.
Anything else? Joe, did you get all of that? Brilliant. Oh, Joe. Okay, thank you. So I think what we should do is just go straight to the vote then for putting it on to defer this application. Do I have a proposer to defer this application? Councillor French. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Purser. Okay, this item has been deferred. No, sorry, can we take a vote? Sorry.
Thank you, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we have a tea break, please?
Can we have a 10-minute tea break? Thank you. Thank you. I will now hand over to David Rowan, Development Manager, to present FYR 22-1416-0, agenda item number 9.
Thank you, Chairman. Initially draw members' attention to the update report circulated in respect to this application. So it's an outline application with matters committed in respect of access to erect up to 4 dwellings, land to the east of 114 Main Road, Parson Drove.
Mr. Chairman.
The application site is identified in red on the location plan and aerial photo. It sits back from Main Road with Silvers Lane running down the eastern side. You can see the predominant character in the area is linear frontage development. Currently a development of 4 dwellings is taking place in front of the site. The access is proposed down the west side of the site from Main Road, and the site sits within flood zones 2 and 3. So access is the only matter to be committed, so the remaining details are illustrative. However, this is considered to be broadly the only way in which the site could be developed for this quantum of houses. As you can see, basically it's a row of 4 sitting at the back of the row of 4 fronting onto the main road. So photos show the character of the site and the wider area, with the residential development taking place in front. Clearly to the rear of that is open countryside. And to summarise, the development proposed is considered to be a clear example of backland or tandem development, which would conflict with the prevailing pattern of development in the area and result in a form of development to the detriment of the character and appearance of the area. It is considered by the Highway Authority that inadequate details have been submitted to demonstrate that suitable visibility can be achieved. In addition, the distance to carry bins to a collection point is greater than specified in the recap guidance, and as such would result in poor living environment for future residents. The recommendation is therefore to refuse the application as set out within the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. We have one speaker on this application, and I would like to invite Gareth Edwards, the agent, to make his presentation to the committee. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today in support of this application for up to 4 dwellings at land east of 114 Main Road, Parson Drove. This application comes before you with the support of all the standard consultees, including highways and the Parish Council. As we are aware, Parish Council has an approved neighbourhood plan, which this proposal is consistent with this, which has led to the support of the Parish Council. The drawings have been revised to show the required visibility space that have been set out by the Highways Authority. Also, the access road proposed is to be controlled by a management company, which will enter into agreement with your refuse collection service to allow access to all properties, so it's consistent with the requirements of RECAP. It should also be noted we have provided a full turning head for both refuse vehicles and fire appliance vehicles, which will allow all vehicles to enter and exit the site in a forward gear. The form and character is consistent with this part of the village. There are a number of in-depth developments on this side of Main Road, being Springfield Gardens, Ingham Hall Gardens, Brewery Close, John Ben's Way, Lakeside and Newlands Road. All of these are off Main Road and on our side of the road, and before you get to Silvers Lane, which is to the east of our site. There are further 2 comprehensive developments after Silvers Lane, again on our side of the road, heading out of the village in Patrick's Way and John Peck Close. This shows that development will not undermine the prevailing form of development in the village, but is consistent with it. This can also be seen with the adjacent property known as the Silverings, which is 114 Main Road, which, as our site plan shows, sits somewhat further back than the new properties that have been erected on Main Road either side of it. As we know, Parson Drove is a limited growth village under LP3, where a small amount of development and new service provision will be encouraged and permitted in order to support their continued sustainability, but less than what would normally in a growth village. Such development may be appropriate as a small village extension. We would argue that this is exactly what this site will be, and in an email from the former planning officer in March of this year, where it was stated that they were overall happy with the scheme, subject to the additional requirements that were set out by Highways. So as you can imagine, we forwarded this to the applicant. So when this came through that it wasn't going for a delegated approval, but actually coming here to planning committee with a recommendation of refusal, we were somewhat shocked. And as I say, this is contrary to Parish Council's recommendation and their approved village plan. This is an outline application with only access reserved. The indicative layout shows a single point of access which will allow 2 vehicles to pass along its entire length, so should not add to vehicles having to wait at the junction on Main Road. The plots are likely to be purchased by self-builders, which is what has happened largely to the plots at the front of the site, and as the sequential test we produced states, there are no other sites in the village which can accommodate this number of dwellings. And a quick check this morning on Rightmove shows there are only 2 individual plots available in the village at the current time, one of which is set behind the village church in a tandem form of development. The proposals will look to use all existing main services, including the Fell sewer. Surface water will be contained on the site with soakaways designed to BRE 365 following a soakage test and will be approved as part of the building regulations application. To conclude, the reasons for the refusal we feel we have addressed in that the form of development is consistent with the prevailing form of development in this part of the village and on this side of the road, where there are a number of comprehensive developments. The vision displays have been shown on the drawings. These are either within the footpath that has been constructed as a part of the application at the front of the site or the highway's verge. The roadway proposed will provide for access to all properties to overcome recap concerns, and an agreement will be made between the management company in control of the roadway and Fenland refuse collection. It also comes with the support of the
30
Parish Council
seconds.
and is consistent with the approved village plan. Please approve the proposal with the conditions you deem appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite members to put questions to Mr Edwards. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Edwards, just checking what I'm hearing. You said that this came forward and it was going to be approved, and then it wasn't. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was an email from Hannah Wild, was it the officer, I believe, that said she was happy with the proposal, subject to the changes that was made. That was in to the highways, which was the requirement of the vision display at the front, which, as I say, was all in the thing. That was all. That was in the middle of March that we received that this year.
Were those amendments submitted and accepted?
Those amendments were submitted. As I say, we've provided the vision display that the highways required. We've never had anything to say that they haven't been approved.
So what went right? If you've had a letter saying that it was going to be supported and then it's not, what?
No, we had an email.
Had an email.
Yeah.
That's good as a letter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It'll be better than a letter. They don't get lost in the post, do they? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr Edwards? Thank you, Mr Edwards. I would now like to invite members to put questions to officers. Okay, no questions to officers. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite members to debate the item in respect of the material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Thank you. I'm very averse to using grade 1 and 2 agricultural land, but we should be feeding ourselves in this country and not relying on other countries to feed us for land development. There's already been some erosion on this field already, and it looks like that the proposed plan would further erode away very good arable land. Thank you.
Any further debate? No? Okay. Thank you, members. Does any... Sorry, Councillor French. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Sorry, can you use your microphone?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just looking at the neighbourhood plan, which was actually agreed on in 2019, which seems to conform with their policies. So I know we've got the 2014, which is well out of date, but this is something that the parish council want to support. So I'm just concerned of what, we've just heard from the applicant's agent, that, we're not looking at the neighbourhood plan as well.
Thank you, Councillor French. Any further debate? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Purser.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've been looking at. I used to know this area quite well. I've been thinking over my mind. I'm actually quite concerned with the entrance now, what have you, because Main Road down in Parson Grove is a very fast. It's not meant to be, but it's actually a very fast road, like a bit of like a rat run, that sort of thing. And when I was regular in Parson Grove, there used to be lots of high hedges and that sort of thing in that area, and coming out to different roadways and all the lights was quite dangerous to actually get out on the road. It concerns me that the vision getting down there could actually be quite, not taking your life in your hands, but could be quite dangerous just there, and I'm concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate? No. Okay. Thank you, members. Does any officer have any points of clarification? Dave?
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you. I think probably just to pick up on Councillor French's point around the neighbourhood plan. The site isn't allocated within the neighbourhood plan at all, and effectively the neighbourhood plan conforms with the local plan in that potentially for Parson Grove, village extensions will be acceptable where there isn't a detrimental impact on the character of the area. That's what's been identified here, that the officer view is that because of the tandem nature of this, there would be a detrimental impact on the character of the area. So my advice to the committee would be that the recommendation is entirely consistent with the policies of the neighbourhood plan.
Councillor French.
Yes, if I may come back. I am quite concerned of what the agent has just stated, that he was under the impression that this application was going to be approved subject to further information on the access. So I do get concerned when agents are told this and then the opposite actually happens.
David.
Thank you, Chairman. I hoped that I might maybe ask that perhaps earlier in the proceedings, but I mean essentially most agents are aware that if they get a advice from an officer, that is the officer opinion and can be subject to change when more senior officers actually view the proposals. It's regrettable, but it does happen on instances. We clearly try to be as consistent as we can with the advice that we give. However, as I'm sure members are aware, there's been somewhat of a transient nature, shall we say, in terms of staffing over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. We've had officers come in who are perhaps not as familiar with interpretation of Fenland policies, perhaps, and I think consequently sometimes misadvice has perhaps been given. Clearly we've got, or members have got a recommendation in front of them on the basis of the assessment contained within the report.
If I may come back, yeah, thanks for that, David. I understand what you're saying about the officers. As you well know, we had one a couple of months ago that they did not recognise the 9-metre strip on the bylaws of middle level, and I don't know if you've been sent a excuse me, a copy of that. I had an email the other day stating they will be using their bylaws in future. So if we give planning permission, you're not going to go over the 9 metres anymore.
In the report, conclusions, item number 11, sub-item 2, there's insufficient information is provided to demonstrate that suitable viability displays can be provided for the required access to the main road. Okay.
I thought that had been addressed.
Through you, Chairman, the update report that's been circulated does pick up on highway safety. Yes, the agent has submitted a further plan with demonstrated visibility displays and indicator width to address the concern raised by the Highway Authority. However, the Highway Authority commented on the 18th of August, so the sort of end of last week, basically saying that the 2.4 metre by 120 metre visibility display has been shown, but does not appear to be fully contained within the application boundary. So there are still question marks over basically whether the appropriate visibility can be achieved, albeit the situation has moved on slightly from what's in the main report.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that it can't be achieved because of land ownership issues.
At the moment, certainly what Highways are saying is that it involves third-party land, so it is not within the applicant's control and it's not within the highway boundary, so it involves third-party land.
I mean, we've had this before the committee before, where land ownership is not a planning consideration. So therefore, if this was approved, and the visibility display could not be achieved through negotiations with third parties, it'd never get built anyway because you couldn't do it. Because we've had that before where we pass things, and if that third-party land, an agreement cannot be reached, then it won't be built anyway. But if it can be agreed and a negotiated settlement of some sort can come forward, then it can be built. That's not for us to determine. Land ownership is not a planning consideration.
It isn't, through Chairman, sorry, apologies. However, as it stands at the moment, there is no indication that that third party would be willing to enter into any agreement. The land is presumably not contained within the red line boundary, and if members were minded to grant the application today, you're effectively granting something that you don't know can actually be delivered, which, as we've sort of said it several times previously, is not really the way to be dealing with applications. Notwithstanding that, again, as the update report says, there are sort of in principle fundamental sort of character issues arising from the application, and as such, sort of that visibility issue hasn't been pursued any further.
Yeah, I mean, character is a subjective opinion. You know, Sydney may like, I may not, and vice versa. It's an opinion. Somebody obviously liked it because they drew it up. To say that it's bad character, this could be very good character. I look at this, I'd really like to hear a little bit more debate from the rest of the committee, see what we think on this one. But you know, we have passed things before that where the applicant hasn't been in control of the land, because land ownership is not a planning consideration. I could put an application in on your land, on your house, Charlie, if I wanted to. Nothing stops me. The fact I don't own it doesn't matter. And if it doesn't get, if the agreement can't come forward, then it just doesn't get built.
Through you, Chairman, if I may. Yes, you could build, or you could make an application to build on Councillor Marks's back garden. However, you would have to actually put a red line around your application site, and you would have to serve the appropriate notice on Councillor Marks, which hasn't happened in this instance. So at the moment, we have got land required for visibility displays that isn't within the application site.
So basically, more information is required. That's in a nutshell, is it?
Through you, Chairman, as I've indicated earlier, given the fundamental sort of concerns that there are from a character point of view, that hasn't been pursued. Now, clearly, if members wish to look more favourably on the application, shall we say, from a character perspective, that is a matter that can potentially be, again, deferred, and we could potentially get that situation resolved and bring the application back to committee if members are minded to defer on that basis.
Yeah, I would be happy to propose a deferment.
So we have a proposal to defer this matter. So could we please put it to a vote? All those who'd like to see this deferred? Sorry, seconder. Right.
Through you, Chairman. If the application is to be deferred to address the access issue, it needs to be made clear that the character issue, members are satisfied that there is no adverse character impact, and that purely the outstanding issue is the access.
Are we all happy with that? No, okay. Anyone would like to second it? Councillor Purser. Okay, can we put that to the vote then, to defer this application?
That's 5 votes, Chairman.
And those against? 1. This application has been deferred. Thank you. Okay, I will now hand over to David Rowan to present FYR 23-0373-PIP, agenda item number 10. David.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for permission in principle for the residential development of up to 9 dwellings at land south east of 76 Station Road, Mayney. The application site is shown in red on the location plan and aerial photo. Consists of a number of redundant agricultural buildings adjacent to the built form of Mayney. The site is in flood zone 3. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Mayney, the road to Wimblington is located on the opposite side of the road, just slightly to the north of the application site. Whilst not a requirement of a permission in principle application, an indicative layout plan showing how up to 9 dwellings could be accommodated in the site has been submitted, and this is now on display for members. And photographs of the site are also now displayed. So photograph number 1 is the site viewed from the north near the junction with Wimblington Road, with 76 Station Road to the right of the photo. Photo 2 shows the existing access to the site and the buildings. And photo 3 shows the existing access, which is sort of shared with 76 Station Road. And number 4 is a view of some of the existing buildings within the site. 5 and 6 again, further views of the buildings within the site. Photo 7 is the site viewed in the context of Station Road facing north. And then photo 8 is a reverse view looking south, and also showing the sort of pedestrian infrastructure as well. So the broad principle of the site being redeveloped for residential purposes is deemed to be acceptable in terms of its proximity to the built form of the settlement, and also the character and appearance of the area, and the benefits of removing a somewhat incompatible use now are also recognised. However, the site is in flood zone 3, which, as members will be aware, is the area at highest risk of flooding. The application is accompanied by a sequential test, which is effectively flawed in its methodology, wrongly discounting a number of available sites. Consequently, it has not been adequately demonstrated that there are no sites available within Mayney which would be sequentially at a lower risk of flooding. Residential use in this location has therefore not been shown to be acceptable in principle. This recommendation is therefore to refuse the application as set out within the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. We have one speaker on this application, and I would like to invite Peter Humphreys, the agent, to make his presentation to the committee. Mr. Humphreys, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application is for a PIP for 9 dwellings on a former pig farm. I've had numerous meetings with my client's representative, which is Ed Tabner from Cheffins, who is acting on behalf of the Risley family. He's made inquiries independently to re-let the buildings, and the Risleys called me in, so we had a sit down with his accountant, the Risleys and Mr. Tabner, and I suggested that perhaps residential use would be better than re-letting it. So they put it in abeyance and left me to make the planning application. The site is currently covered with old pig sheds, as you can see from the photographs. And so the principle of development in depth, albeit agricultural, has already been set on the site. The application is clearly supported by most of those living next to the site. I don't know, I'm sure Councillor Marks will have smelt the pig farm in the height of summer, and it's not particularly pleasant, although I fully appreciate the planning officer will say that's not a reason for approval. This site is at a crossroads. It can be developed for residential or it can go back to its former use. Since Mr. Risley Senior died, the site has been unused, but they clearly have got to do something with it. Parish Council agree in principle. Environmental Health, unsurprisingly, support the application. They or say they have no objections. Environment Agency, we will need to do a flood risk assessment at technical stage submission. In principle, they have no objections. Highways have no objections. Development is within walking distance to the Mainey trading station and all facilities in the village. Mainey is a growth village where development in the existing urban area or as a small village extension of limited scale will be appropriate, as appropriate, will be supported. Para 120 of NPPF 2021 states that substantial weight should be given to the value of using suitable brownfield land. Again, as I've said, this is not brownfield in the true term because it is agricultural, although clearly we could make a planning application to convert the barns to residential and then apply to have it redeveloped as a brownfield site. So it's a bit convoluted, but it's an option to us. The development will contribute towards the sustainability of the settlement and not harm the wide open character of the countryside as it's already developed. I also confirm for the chairman who isn't here that if approved, there'll be wheel washing facilities, Mr. Chairman. May I also suggest that reading the letters of support for the application, the community benefit of not having smells and associated problems with the pig farm outweigh those of the site within a flood zone 3. So the community benefit clearly can be addressed as getting rid of the site which exists at the moment, for which mitigation measures including which can be addressed. And in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I think you'll all agree that this application has been a long time coming, and I know certainly Parish Council and others have said to me, when are you going to put Risley's application in? Well, here it is, Mr. Chairman. You now have the opportunity to address it, and I welcome your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. I'd now like to invite members to put questions to Mr. Humphrey. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Councillor French.
Mr. Humphrey, can you tell me how long is it since the pigs have been gone?
2 to 3 years. 5 years. Oh, sorry.
5. Long time. Yeah, I'm just looking at my training notes, and material considerations and noise, smell and contamination are material, as you should know.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just curious why you put the application as a PIP as opposed to an outline.
It's cheaper and quicker.
Right. Okay. So then following up from that, you've obviously heard of some comments around the fact that sequential test they consider not to be appropriate. What is your, I suppose, response to that?
On early PIPs, flood risk wasn't an issue. Clearly, since more applications have gone in, they've said it is a material consideration. We also know that you can have a community benefit which can offset flood risk, and we believe sincerely that the benefit of the removal of the pig farm far outweighs the flood risk harm that could exist.
In the report, and I think you've alluded to this, the officers say that it could result in the loss of employment. Obviously, the site's not active at the moment, so I'm assuming there is no employment.
There used to be one pig farmer.
Yeah.
So yes, but there is no employment at present.
At the moment, no.
I mean, we have the opportunity of applying to convert them to employment uses, but we think that would be problematic in its location anyway.
Thank you. Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Humphries. Where else have you looked for a sequential test for other pieces of land? In Mainey, are there many pieces of land in Mainey that would be suitable to take this size of development?
No, there are not. We've got the flood risk drafted, ready to go in if this is approved, and we can't find any at present, but of course we'll have to do that when we make the technical submission.
Thank you.
Could we just go back to the previous aerial slide with the red line, please? That one. Is there a reason you haven't taken on the further barn behind that?
There is, Mr. Chairman. It would exceed 1 hectare, which is the maximum size allowed for a PIP.
So you may be coming back to ask for further development?
I've got no instructions. Of course, that is a possibility. Once we've got the principle established, we found in the office sometimes it's as easy to put a full application in next as opposed to a technical application. Really what we're trying to establish is will the planners stroke planning committee, would they prefer to see this as residential? If they would, I think we may actually include that extra shed on the next application. We certainly wouldn't leave it there and develop the 9 and leave 1 pig shed.
And with developing that, roughly how many more houses do you believe you would get on there?
1.
Okay.
But then, of course, we hit the affordable housing level. So we would have to sit down with Cheffins and the client.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Benny.
I'd just like to say to Mr. Humphries that if this is approved today, I would be pleased to see maybe his second application come in and his offer of the contributions and the 20% for Waterloo Home, which I'm sure that he will be very willing to offer, because last time he sat here he was very generous, and I would like to see the same level of generosity. In fact, I'd like to see it up to the £2,000 per unit. If you take a steer, because Mainey could do with some money. Poor old Charlie, it would be good. So if this gets approved and if we come back with another application, I would welcome that with the contributions that you are so generous at giving away. Thank you very much.
If I can just comment on that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take that on board. But of course, when we go away and if this is approved, when we put another application in, as David will tell you, it will then come back to committee with a recommendation for refusal, because it's a new application. It's not the technical support of this one if approved. So we will have to take a balanced view on what the decision is today. And of course, we then have the risk that there'll be different committee members, so there may be different opinions. So we have to weigh it all up, but the chances are we would come back with an application for a slightly larger site to include all the buildings and a contribution.
Councillor French.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Benny, and yes, section 106s, I love them, as you know. But we desperately need people there because we've got a car park we need to fill up.
And on that note, Councillor Purser.
How do you follow that one, Mr. Chairman? Yeah, I have 2 main concerns, having read through all the information there. Number one, if I have this right, the information they actually told me that there's a lack of a footpath, or proper footpath going from that actual site into the village. Is that correct, or is that going to be dealt with, or?
Not that I'm aware of. I think there is a footpath. I'm confident there is. There's certainly one the other side because we built it when we done the other development.
And the other thing that concerned me was, and again, if you'd like to elaborate on this, I don't know if I got this right, having read it, whether I misread it or what have you, but it said in the notes that I have here, possibility of contaminated land.
Yes, I'm sure there could well be, and we'll have to have a contamination report because pigs would have produced ammonia that would have leached into the soil, so we would certainly expect that.
Right,
yes.
lovely, okay, thank you.
Just going to comment. When I went there the other day, I thought there was footpath.
There is up to the
Yeah.
brown buildings at the bottom of number 7. It's got weeds on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Humphreys. I would now like to invite members to put questions to officers. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. So just covering the point about the sequential test, and obviously that would normally, or I guess what the report's saying is that can be covered under the sort of technical guidance. So on that basis, what are our concerns? Is it because we cannot at this moment prove that there is no other more suitable sites?
Through you, Chairman, basically national planning policy says that sequential tests should be applied to development in flood zone 3. That's a sort of a red line. It's not a discretionary policy at all. A sequential test has been submitted with the application, which incorrectly rules out a number of sites which would be deemed as being alternately available, to the tune of about 60. So there's effectively 60 plots in Mainey which would be sequentially preferable, which for the purpose of the sequential test would be available, and consequently the Office of View, notwithstanding the other issues of the application which are deemed acceptable, is that the application should be refused.
Just to clarify that, these other sites are for 9+ properties then in Maine, is that correct?
Through you, Chairman, the adopted supplementary planning document in respect of flood and water, the Cambridgeshire-wide document, says that for a sort of a comparable site is any site which can individually or cumulatively take the development that's being proposed. So there's a range of one of the applications, for example, that has been discounted is for 29 dwellings. There are several that are of single plots or 2 plots that have also been discounted. So there's a range of plots that are available within a range of developments which would be sequentially preferable.
Okay. David, can I ask a question? I'm probably going to put you on the spot a bit unfairly. You came to the village 2 years ago when it flooded, very kindly, and we went round the village where the flooding was in flood zone 3, and it was nowhere near here. It was almost 3/4 of a mile away as a crow flies. We've seen another application at the end of Westfield where we were told flood zone 3, can't build, all the rest of it. The property is so far out of the ground because they made mitigation to do this. But again, it's on a hill and the water, if it ever floods, we're all going to be in problems. Do you not feel we're being a bit harsh on this as flood zone 3 as a development?
Through you, Chairman, not particularly, because that's what national policy says that we're supposed to do, and we've got a legal duty to consider planning policy. In terms of other sites within the village that may have experienced flooding, I'm not sure what exactly the sources of that flooding was. For example, was it because a stream or a drain had burst its banks, or was it because the infrastructure couldn't cope with the volume of water that it was required to accept? In terms of sort of mitigation measures, again, this is a permission in principle application, so we're looking at broad land use in principle, and we haven't got any details of flood mitigation, and nor can we consider those.
But in your experience, do you believe that could be mitigated against by raising the land level?
Through you, Chairman, ultimately, any site can be mitigated from flooding if you raise it high enough. But that's not the thrust of national policy. The thrust of national policy is to prevent development in flood zone 3 in areas that can flood in the first place, irrespective of mitigation or not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor French.
Thank you. Yeah, just to give you an update on flooding, as you well know, I sit on the flood floor at County Council and was heavily involved with many after the December 2020, and I can assure you that part did not flood. It was certainly other parts, and possibly some of the reasons which you're well aware of was blocked dikes, drains, etc., etc.
Thank you, Councillor French. Councillor Booth.
Yeah, I mean, just an observation on the point about flooding. We all know the Environment Agency maps are years out of date and don't actually reflect the reality. But I just wanted to pick up on the point, I think it's in 1.3, where you say it's out of character for this part of the part of the village, where you say there's an in-depth development. But down the road, about 100 metres or so, we've got Charlemagne Drive, haven't we, which is an in-depth development. So I do have concerns about that observation. And looking at properties down Station Road, they're not all on frontage. Some are set back, so there's quite a range of different sort of architectural styles and the like. So I guess I just wanted to pick up on that. So yeah, we do have. Yeah.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. I mean, my reading of paragraph 1.3 in the executive summary is that while we acknowledge that the character is predominantly frontage development, the application site itself is something of an exception. The buildings aren't particularly visually attractive, and paragraph 1.3 concludes with, as such, the redevelopment to the site for housing may be appropriate and potentially more compatible with the adjoining residential use.
Issue as far as architectural merit is concerned with development of this site.
In terms of architectural merit, we've not actually got any architectural designs in front of us, so it's very difficult to comment.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for David? Nope. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite members to debate the item in respect of any material planning consideration relevant to the application. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Benny.
Thank you, Chairman. Does Maney want a pig farm or does it want some homes? Let me look at that one for a second. I mean, it's just a mess, isn't it? And I know David will say, because it's a mess isn't a reason to pass it, which I thoroughly agree with. But if this was in Chatteris, my area, and I'm sure people in Maney feel pretty much the same, do you want a load of derelict buildings sitting there, or do you want some nice houses there? The only reason for refusal is flood zone 3. The sequential test, yes, there may be other sites in Maney. I can think of 2 in Westfield Road that would take this, but they're not being developed. Now, why should those sites be sitting there blocking this site? Because that is what a sequential test does. Because if those people don't want to bring those forward, then that means this site won't, until they're built out, this one won't be on the cards. We've got an application for this in front of us that does bring community benefit. I would not want to live next door to a pig farm, and I'm fairly certain the people in Maney deserve better than a pig farm, which is where they are, if anybody take it on. I mean, pig farming is not thriving in any parts of the country that I can see. So really, all we're looking at is flood zone 3. Does this bring community benefit? Does this improve Maney? Personally, and this is my view, yes it does. And therefore the community benefit outweighs the policy, and therefore this can be mitigated against, it will be safe to live in, and therefore it's a planning in principle application, and it just changes the land usage, and it says that we can build houses on it. And I think this is a much better use of land than derelict buildings and a potential pig farm for Maney, which I'm sure Councillor Marks would not want the smell of that drifting across the road to Charmont Drive for him. I can see what the policy is. I see this, but it doesn't make sense, and it is an opportunity for Maney to get betterment from it, and therefore I think this one deserves support. This application.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. Councillor Lister.
Thank you. I fully concur with Councillor Benny. I think this will be beneficial to Maney. I think we have to be mindful of flood zone 3. There's been plenty of instances in Fenland where we built on flood zone 3, adjacent to flood zone 3, on flood zone 3, in much worse cases than this flood zone map appears at Maney. My only request to the applicant again is, should this be approved at a later stage, is that there's an element of amenity space for putting that housing development. Thank you.
Councillor Booth.
I mean, I tend to agree with the comments made, but the issue we've got is the National Planning Policy Framework is telling us that, you know, that we shouldn't until the sequential test has passed, which obviously they're saying hasn't. It sounds like the applicant is ready to move on that very quickly. So I think we are going against national policy, and the officers' hands have probably been tied on that because that's what they're interpreting. So it would be this committee that is obviously going against that policy, but I think that highlights the issue with the National Planning Policy Framework and the fact that flood maps are out of date. They drastically need to be updated and made more realistic.
Yeah. Councillor French.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Booth, but you have to weigh up what is the benefit against not the benefit, and the benefit is to get rid of that mess.
Okay. Anything further? If I can just say, obviously, I live literally number 7. I live on Charmont Drive, which I believe flood zone 3. Yes, on a hot summer's day, Mr. Riser used to clear his pigs out, and we could all smell it for probably 2 days. So, and there was probably in excess of 1,500, 2,000 pigs there. So there was a lot of pigs there at the time. It's now standing derelict. There is still a rat infestation, which they will always be around a pig farm. To get rid of those derelict buildings, as you come into Maney, that's the first thing you see as you're coming down into the village of Maney. Flooding, as I said to David, and probably been a bit unfair on David, but yeah, we have not had flooding that end of the village in the last 18 years. And although they say it's flood zone 3, I think the water will go a lot further down the road into the village before it gets anywhere near that, depending, of course, if the council actually clean the gullies out from the weeds. But I'm in full support of this. I sat in the parish council meeting and listened to what they had to say. Parish councillors are, and a lot of people in the village are. You go a quarter of a mile down the road on picture 8, and there stands a bungalow, derelict, roof kicked in, some Harris fencing, brambles all there, lets down the village totally. That needs to come down and be, you know, it just makes Maney look rough. This will tidy a very big area of Maney up, so I'm in full support of it. Okay, thank you. Does any officer have any points of clarification? No. Okay. As mentioned previously, I will be initially looking for a proposer to go with officer's recommendation to refuse planning permission. Do I have a proposer for this recommendation? Okay. Can I ask for a different proposal? Councillor Benny.
Thank you. I propose we go against officer's recommendation and approve this application. Stated on the fact that I feel that the sequential test is being blocked by other land not being brought forward. This will be brought forward, and also the community benefit by getting rid of a potential environmental health problem with rats and pig mess and everything else that is there. And I think this is the right thing for the sake of the people of Maney.
Okay, I will now hand over to David Rowan to present FYR 230430F, agenda item number 11.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a full application to erect a dwelling and detached store building, including the demolition of existing outbuilding and the widening of existing vehicular access and the formation of a new vehicular access for number 66 Wimbledon Road, land south of Wimbledon Road in March. Initially draw members' attention to the update report that's been circulated. So the site is shown in red on the location plan and aerial photo. It sits within an established line of development on Wimbledon Road on the edge of March, and some members may recall the refusal of an application on this site in February this year for a dwelling. The proposed dwelling is shown on the right of the existing, with an area of car parking to the front of this and a widening of the existing access. The existing garage will be removed to facilitate this development. A new access to serve the existing dwelling is shown to the left of this image, sort of in the dark grey area. A detached store building is proposed to the rear garden of the new dwelling, and this is shown at the top of the plan. So the elevations of the proposed dwelling are shown on the upper images. As you can see, it's a single storey, and then the store building is shown in those lower images. And again, proposed floor plans are shown for completeness. Street scene drawing is shown, and I think this perhaps, it shows the proposed dwelling in the context of the adjacent dwellings and illustrates really the concern which officers have in that the dwelling appears somewhat cramped and crammed onto the site relative to the neighbouring properties, and its design seems contrived within this context. Obviously, a lot lower ridge height, a lot narrower frontage, and therefore somewhat out of keeping with those two adjacent properties. For comparison, the previously refused scheme is shown, and this was refused as set out within the report for similar reasons in terms of the character and appearance of the area, but also due to relationship issues with adjoining properties. Again, photos of the site are shown on the screen. And a slightly wider view of the site in its context. So to summarise, whilst the previous reason for refusal relating to residential amenity has been overcome due to the reduction of the ridge height, it is still considered that the narrow dwelling proposed, combined with its proximity to the neighbouring dwellings and now exacerbated by the stark difference in ridge heights, will result in a development to the detriment of the character and appearance of the area. To be consistent with the previous decision made by the committee, the recommendation can only be one of refusal as set out within the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. We have one speaker on this application. I would like to invite Jack Hinson, speaker on behalf of the applicant, to make his presentation to the committee. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for letting me speak today. I am here on behalf of my grandfather, who is the applicant and resident of 66 Wimbledon Road. This is actually a family project, and we all live in the area, so hopefully I can put forward our perspective and thinking as to this proposal. As far as we can see, there are two elements to this: proximity and, as been mentioned, a low roof height. If we can move to the second slide, please. The original application was at the height of the host property, but the comments were of overbearing. So naturally, as an applicant, we thought, well, we've got to reduce this to alleviate those concerns. However, this application, the one shown below, has now had the feedback of being too reduced. So on the one hand, we've been told we're too reduced, and on the other hand, we're told we're being too high. So there must be a balance to be had between these two proposals. If we could get the next slide. As you can see by the amendment on screen, we have tried to be proactive by providing a solution. I did see this committee was given a last-minute update yesterday, but just so you're aware, we did offer to adjust the roof height 2 months ago on the 15th of June. This is not new information, and we were surprised when it was never accepted. We do believe that this fundamentally addresses the refusal by giving a balanced roof height entirely consistent with the neighbour at number 68. And I just asked today that this be given consideration as a balanced and positive outcome. I would just also make the point that the refusal says contrived being significantly lower. Now, obviously, this is level with number 68. So I feel like that resolves that commentary. If we could get the next slide, please. In terms of proximity, that's obviously a subjective concept, but there are ways to measurably show that a site is suitable for a dwelling. Typically, garden space and parking are just unachievable when buildings are too close, but both have been demonstrated in this instance. And as you can see by highways and planning officer comments on the screen, in fact, there are large garden spaces provided, and we think this is an ideal opportunity to facilitate effective use of land. If we could get the next slide, please. There is mixed development down Wimbledon Road. Bungalows, chalets, two-storey properties are all neighbouring in a varied pattern. This is not a new estate where you've got house type A, B, C repeated on loop. We believe our proposal positively reflects this character and street pattern as per LB 16D. If we could get the next slide, please. So to be proactive, we've made many reductions since the original application to specifically promote separation and accommodate your previous concerns. The dwelling is now single storey with no chalet element. The roof height and building bulk have been reduced. The roof is hip to sympathetically go away from neighbouring property. Internal footprint has been reduced. Separation between dwellings has been increased. There are also features such as flush eaves and staggered elevations to enhance that feel of separation. You can see the level of reduction on the top drawing, where the previous height has been imposed over our amended roof height proposal, and similarly on the drawing to the side, you can see the increase in boundary separation, the red showing where the previous outline would have been. If we could get the next slide, please. For clarity, and on the basis of the amended roof, the top computer-generated image shows our new bungalow. And the bottom photo shows directly opposite the site, which is very similar in street pattern. We feel this application is a perfect opportunity to offer a new home which complements the area and is sustainably located in the growth area of March. Hopefully you can see the merits of our revisions and reductions here today, and a positive way forward can be achieved. I would, because I've got time, also point out that the picture below is directly opposite the site, and it could be considered that there are negative elements to those dwellings, in that there's
you have 30 seconds.
There's a two-storey roof section. There's a side-facing bay window on the ground floor, directly adjacent to a neighbouring property. Now, the reason I mention that is because our proposal has none of these negative elements, and we think it's actually a very considerate solution to the site and a positive contribution to the street scene. Please, if you have any questions, do ask. There are no resident objections and no consultee objections, and actually 8 supportive comments. So thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hinson. I would now like to invite members to put questions to Mr. Hinson. If you would like to ask a question, please could you raise your hand? I'll start then. I'll ask you a question. Is this going to be for your own personal use or your grandfather's use, or is this to be sold, just development and sold?
We're not sure yet, but my parents, who also live down Wimbledon Road, have shown a desire to maybe move into this property. Just so you're aware also that my grandfather is 80 years old, and this process now has drawn over 12 months. Again, we've tried to be very proactive, and this would help to, I don't know, keep his mind active. It gives him a project to do. As I said, my parents might want to move into the property, but again, we haven't decided on that yet. But there are lots of benefits to us in terms of doing this project.
Do you actually own either property either side?
Yes, so my grandfather is the owner of number 66, the chalet bungalow.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Hinton. Thank you. I would now like to... Sorry. I would now like to invite members to put questions to officers. Councillor French.
Yes, I know Windington Road exceptionally well. It is part of my Fenland district, and I was actually down there Sunday with my colleagues cutting down a dangerous hedge not very far from this property. I mean, it is a tatty old garage at this time. It certainly would improve the area. Wimbledon Road is a mixture of 1 stories, 2 stories, etc. The question I want to ask David, behind the property, is that part of the BCP for March East? That's the first question. And tell me when we had green great crested newts in that part of March. Not crested newts, but green ones.
Thank you, through you, Chairman. Yes, the land to the rear would be part of the BCP area.
So when we do the BCP, when the planning applications come in, we will be looking at the crested newts, green crested newts.
I don't think that's particularly material to the current planning application in front of the committee, with respect.
The question I'm asking, are the crested newts in the front or in the back? I'm very surprised on a main road and how busy Wimbledon Road is, there's actually newts.
Through you, Chairman, I think there's perhaps a bit of confusion arising over this in terms of it's within an area that's identified as having potential for great crested newts, which is on a kind of a traffic light system of green, amber or red. And the fact it's a green zone indicates that there is lower potential than in a red zone.
Any further questions? Councillor Booth.
Well, I'm not sure if Dave can answer this, but we've got the Marchtown Council comment. I just wondered, did you get clarification to this? Because it says approval subject to concerns that the new design is detrimental to the street scene compared to the previous design. That indicates to me that it's worse than the previous design, but they're still subject or recommended approval. Is that correct?
Through you, Chairman, I would interpret those comments in the same way that Councillor Booth has done.
Thank you. Any further Councillor French?
Yeah, I did see hours ago when we first started, not excusing the town council, but part of the town council, when these, if you look at the date of this application when it came in, was probably came in before we had elections and new members, before they had training. So I think, you know, we need to take that into consideration.
Okay. Further questions? No. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite members to debate the item in respect of any material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Councillor French.
Yeah. I mean, the only, apart from the crested newts, the only main reason you've got is the design. And I think, you know, the applicant is prepared to look at, and I think we should give them the opportunity to discuss with officers what will be a suitable design. What is there at the moment is a horrible wooden garage. It certainly doesn't enhance the street scene if we have something in there. So I would want that one deferred for officers and the applicant to come up, or for the applicants to come up with a suitable design that will satisfy the officers.
Thank you. Councillor Booth.
I mean, it appears to me that the applicant is really trying, but whatever he's putting forward isn't meeting the officer's approval. To me, this type of issue is more the subjective nature about the design, and it's whether the actual design we've got in front of us is adverse or not. And I think having seen these photos of what's there, what's opposite, and you know, the different nature of buildings we've got in this part of town, I'm not, you know, I don't see that this is an adverse design, and it's clear the applicant has actually, you know, tried very hard. They've almost gone too far one way, and they've then sort of gone back to try and get a compromise again. So, you know, if half the applicants did that you know, put planning applications in, would be in a much better situation, I think. You know, we have too many applications where, you know, there isn't that type of compromise. So I'd actually be willing to support this application.
Further debate?
I'm just echoing what Councillor Booth said. I think to me, the original design that was submitted is more in keeping with other properties on the street than the new design that the applicant was made to submit. So if we keep telling the applicants to alter their designs, and then if a different officer or someone has a different point of view later on, it's like, you know, exactly, yeah, it's ping pong match, yeah. Yeah, so I would say I'm happy to support the application as it is. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my point is that they've been told to change it to suit what the officers want. They've changed it and then it was still refused. I mean, I'm not a planning expert. I've just, I'm a committee member, I've just joined the committee. I would have thought a two-story design would have been safer in an area that is prone to flooding. Apologies, I don't know what flood zone it's in. But if you had a two-story design, flood zone 1, if you had a two-story, if it was a two-story design and there was flooding, that of course there is a chance of people moving upstairs for safety. But I am not particularly saying go back to the original design. I'm just saying tell the applicants what you want and let them stick with it. Don't tell them to change it and then refuse it again. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Irrespective of what the previous design is, we're not looking at that. We're looking at this one. And this one is, do we pass this one or do we not? That's it. But to go round in circles and say what we would like, and that is not this. We don't decide that. The applicants put their application in, and we look at what's there. So we're chasing something we ain't going to get there by doing this. Do we like this application or do we not? And that's really where we are.
Councillor Booth.
Just a point, I mean, it says new application up there, but that's not the amended version, is it, that we've now got, because the ridge line is in it. Yeah, so David.
Through you, Chairman, I think just to clarify, the lower image here is the one that's in front of members for consideration today. A further iteration of the plan has been submitted. However, that we haven't accepted that as part of the application, given the sort of change for sixpence that we're sort of looking at almost with it, and the fact that it doesn't really address the fundamental concerns that we have as officers with this site. Unfortunately, you sometimes get a site that whatever you do on it will not be acceptable. So we had the original application that we got the concerns about, and which ultimately the committee at the time agreed with, in terms of the sort of design, the constrained nature of the site, and the fact it would appear as a sort of a cramped development combined with the impacts on the neighbouring properties. To the best of my knowledge, there was no subsequent discussion with the applicants. They've gone away and sought to address those issues by coming in with the further iteration that's shown on the lower image there, which sort of compounds in effect that slightly contrived design to effectively kind of squeeze something onto the side.
Sorry, can we just, we had some slides previously with a roof line that was the same level there. So that says amended proposal. Is that not, that's what's in front of us today? So why has that come up as an amended proposal?
Chairman, that is part of the applicant's presentation.
Can we actually see what the actual plan is in front of us, please? For clarification, it is in flood zone 1.
So why have we not accepted it? Is it, we've obviously received this amended plan. What's the reason for not accepting that so we can consider it part of this planning committee today?
Essentially because it isn't considered to address the fundamental issues that officers have with the application, which is that you've got clearly two properties either side of it, which are over a width of around about 10 metres, I think, and you've got a far narrower property sort of sandwiched in the middle, which is clearly going to have a different aspect, a lot narrower frontage, and which is going to therefore appear out of character.
Well, but surely in the planning process, if an applicant submits a revised application, we have to look at it. Why is it that why we not got it in front of us?
Through you, Chairman, essentially, if an application is submitted, there is no requirement to accept amended plans, fundamentally.
Councillor Booth.
Sorry, yeah, and that's an officer decision, is it? Basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Benny.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't an amended plan. This is a new application. Surely, it's amended from the previous application, but this is another application. So what was in the previous one is totally irrelevant to what we're looking at. We're looking at this one today, and David is right. Some sites just don't blend to having that. Whatever you do, you can't put anything on it. That is part of planning. I mean, it is very tight in there.
I think the confusion is, having just seen the photograph or the drawing that has been put up by the agent since, that's where the confusion is now. So we are looking at this today as opposed to the roof line being where it is on the next proposal that's been put in. But I believe that had been put in some time ago from what the gentleman was saying. So is there a reason that hasn't actually come, because looking at that today, that looks squat, whereas the other one did look right. Sorry, David.
Through Chairman, I think the explanation is provided in your update report. An amended plan has been submitted following the recommendation of refusal being published. The amendment submitted results in the ridge line of the roof being in line with the adjacent bungalow to the south. However, this roof pitch is still lower than the host property number 66 and is therefore still considered to create an unsympathetic addition to the street scene. The amendment does not also overcome the fact that the development is considered a cramped form of development due to the size constraint of the site. The amendment submitted does not address the fundamental issues and is therefore not being accepted.
Thank you. Yeah, for many people who know Wimbledon Road, and I know it exceptionally well, from the bottom end right up to the top, it is a hodgepodge. It is a mixture of detached, semi-detaches, bungalows, very small ones, and I think the applicants have tried. This is what this is what is in front of us, we believe. I still think it looks better than the old tatty wooden shed that's there. So it actually enhances the street scene rather than takes it away.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, and I'm concerned that, the applicants are trying to address the issues they put in a revised plan and we've not accepted it. I mean, what sort of message does that send out that, we're willing to work with applicants to get designs that are appropriate? So I'm concerned. But I think what Councillor Frank says, this is still an improvement probably in what's there, and it's not going to be out of character. And it is, at the end of the day, something like this is more of a subjective assessment as opposed to policy. It's what we think fits in from our own sort of personal viewpoints.
Sorry, am I correct in saying that you mentioned in your earlier statement that there are some sites that whatever alterations are made are just not acceptable?
That's what I said, yes. Unfortunately, you do sometimes get sites that, because they're so narrow, because of how the houses, either side of them are orientated, that whatever you do, if you solve one problem, you create another.
So does that then apply to this site? And then if it does, why did you not communicate that with the applicant? Why do they have to then make alterations to their plans?
Through you, Chairman, that is my view with this site. At no point, to the best of my knowledge, have any amendments been sought to the application by the case officer. Any amendments that have come in, and indeed this second application, have come in because of that's what the applicant has decided to do.
Sorry, my question was, does the applicant know that that was your view before they make the amendments?
Through you, Chairman, I'm not really sure that that's particularly relevant. Again, I'm not aware that there's been any discussion with the case officer to sort of discuss what may or may not be acceptable on the site. And to some degree, as Councillor Benny has said, and I think we're perhaps getting to the point of, with respect to the committee, having almost done this to death a little bit, there's an application that's in front of the committee, and to some extent it's a case of making a decision as to whether you feel it's acceptable or not.
Councillor Benny.
I mean, we've had the slides up there showing what else is in Wimbledon Road, but this is when you see the three, this site is very much narrower than the other sites where there are three houses in a row. And what does it do to the house on the left? It blocks the light. Yeah, there's a rickety old shed there. You could pull it down and put a brick garage on there, which would enhance the number 66. Yeah, does it fit? I mean, they're all nice houses along there. All of them are. And you're shoehorning something in there which is very, very tight. And in terms of street scene, what does that do to all the other houses along there? It's a committee decision, but it's very tight. Just because there's a rickety old shed on there, you could take that down and build a very nice garage there. That would enhance the area. If you look at the width of the one at the top to the one at the bottom, the middle one is a lot wider on the bottom one than it is on the top. Committee's got to make a decision.
Listen to that, I agree, but then I go back to the one on Wimbledon where we had a roof height of 1.5 metres taller than everything else, and we were told that was going to look out of character, and you drive around the Wimbledon bypass, you can't even tell that roof is any higher, and even when you get close to it. So does it look pushed in, does it not? I don't know where you go with this, I really don't. Councillor Booth.
Kevin, should you attempt to move the officer recommendation and let's see where it takes us?
Okay. Okay. Thank you, members. As mentioned previously, I will now be initially looking for a proposer to go with officer's recommendation to refuse planning permission. Do I have a proposer? Okay. Can I ask for a different proposal?
Okay.
Councillor Booth.
I'll recommend approval, Chair.
I'll second.
Okay, could we have reasons, please?
So, well, contrary to the officer view, I don't think it would be out of character. It's probably best if we go back to the actual application site as opposed to not the revised one as well. But yeah, and I feel that it would be a suitable development on that plot of land. And I do not believe it will cause any residential loss of amenity to neighbouring properties. No, if anything, this, because because it's not amended to the new roof line, it's got even less intrusion onto neighbours. So those are my reasons for approval. Do we need to come up with other conditions, or are we happy to work with officers to?
I think we should certainly come up with a few more, and also delegation.
Reasonable conditions.
Reasonable conditions.
Yeah. So, such as, no materials to be left out of the site during construction. I'm sure the chair would have, if the councillor Connor would say that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a proposal from Councillor Booth, seconded by Councillor French. Can I ask that we now go to a vote to go against officer's recommendation and to agree for this application?
That's 6 votes, Chairman.
That's been approved.
Councillor.
Those against, sorry. They're abstaining. That application has been approved. Okay. I will now hand over to David Rowan to present FYR 230548-0, agenda item number 12.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an outline application with all matters reserved to erect up to 5 dwellings, land west of 176 High Road, Gorefield. Initially draw members' attention to the update report that's been circulated. So the application site is outlined in red on the location plan and aerial photo. It's an agricultural field located adjacent to the built form of Gorefield, with Hassock Hill Drove to the immediate west. The site is located in flood zone 3. An outline application with all matters reserved for 5 dwellings on the site was refused in August last year. For slightly wider context, this image is provided showing the relationship between the site and the open countryside surrounding the settlement. So the application is in outline. Individual access points are shown to the dwellings. The remainder of the details are illustrative. Obviously shows a row of 5 properties running up to the Hassock Hill Drove. Probably also important to note that there is no connection to the settlement shown as part of the application. And whilst in their comments within the update report, the Highway Authority do not object to this, they do raise questions over the sustainability of developments in such a location. So the images on screen show the current nature of the site and its surroundings and its clear relationship to the open countryside rather than the built form of the settlement. So to summarise, Gorefield is a small village in the settlement hierarchy where only infill development will normally be permitted. The scheme is clearly not infill development and would result in a linear incursion into the countryside to the detriment of the character and appearance of the area. In addition, the site is within flood zone 3 and the sequential test submitted is inadequate as the area of search is the settlement only rather than the wider district, which should be the area given that the development proposes or the application proposes a scale of development in excess of that set out within the settlement hierarchy. The recommendation is therefore to refuse the application as set out within the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. We have one speaker on this application, and I would like to invite Gareth Edwards, the agent, to make his presentation to the committee. Mr. Edwards, you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon again. Thank you once again to allow me to speak in support of this application for up to 5 dwellings at land west of 176 High Road, Gorefield. This application comes before you with the support of most of the standard consultees and the support of a number of businesses from the village. The proposal will provide for 5 individual plots which are likely to be purchased by self-build or small developers which do not have the financial capacity to purchase the larger sections of development land in the district. As has been highlighted on many occasions at this committee, these parcels are massively important for Fenland to provide a diverse housing mix in the district. As we know, Gorefield is a small village under LP3 where development will be considered on its merits, but will normally be of a very limited nature and normally be limited to a scale of residential infilling or a small business opportunity. We would argue that as the site is the continuation of the constant built form on this side of the road of High Road, and the natural boundary to the village built form is that of Hassock Hill Drove, which is to the west of our site. We are infilling from the existing built form to the natural end of the village. It should also be noted that there are further properties and businesses down Hassock Hill. However, we would suggest that these are in open countryside, whereas our development is a continuation of the built form and will provide a natural break between the village and the open countryside beyond. It should also be noted that LP3 description mentions normally a couple of times, and as we know, what is normal? And I would argue that the site, similar to many, this site is similar to many that have been approved in the district and also within the village itself, especially the frontage plots that were approved on High Road at the other end of the village, where there is a dike that was seen as the end of the village for infilling development. And that has works has started on one of the dwellings and finished on one of the dwellings on that. This is an outline application with all matters reserves. The indicative layout shows how the site could easily accommodate 5 large properties, but should you feel a single point of access should be provided, we are happy to accept this as a condition of the approval. We have noted the points made by North Level in support of the application, and any development will look to put surface water from the site into North Level main drain, which is the other side of High Road, and we will make the relevant applications to both North Level and Cambs County Council. The site has not been maintained for a number of years, other than a bit of grazing. Any proposal will look to clean out the dikes to improve the drainage for the site and the surrounding properties. It should also be noted that the land has not been commercially farmed for many years, and viewing images from Google Earth, it was it was in its current use in 1999, so no loss of commercially farmed land. We have carried out a sequential test on the land as part of Gorefield and not an elsewhere location. This has been shown that there are no available sites in the village that can accommodate the number of dwellings proposed. I also checked Rakemove this morning and there are no plots for sale in the village. To conclude, the reasons for the refusal we feel we've addressed in that the development is an infilling development between the existing constant built form of High Road and that of Hassock Hill Drove. It is the natural boundary to the village, and that from this point you are then into open countryside. The sequential test carried out on Gorefield, which the site abuts the existing built form of the village, shows that there are no available plots in the village. The site is consistent with other developments that have been approved both within the village and the district as a whole. I would ask you to approve the application with the conditions you deem appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite members to put questions to Mr. Edwards. If you would like to ask a question, please could you raise your hand?
Thank you. You stated that the land had not been commercially used since 1999. I mean, the photographs there show a cornfield.
That's not, the site is just grass field, there's no corn.
It's not crop.
No, it hasn't been. I can honestly
It
say
looks
my
very
wife,
much to me like crop.
it certainly is.
Am I wrong? Or is it just wasteland? Or is it?
To be fair, my thought was it set aside, which is still commercial property, it's still being used, but you were getting paid a grant on it.
It's just been, as far as, I mean, the client has owned it for a long while. They say it's never been farmed. My wife is actually
I'm looking at the photograph. It's surely to me that looks like a cornfield.
This scrubland it's never been. My wife's lived in the village since 1975 and don't ever remember it farmed.
I'm looking at the photograph.
That must be the field opposite or further on. But certainly it's the where you can see the signposts on the number 3. It definitely isn't. If someone's done it illegally, put it that way. Because the owners have never farmed it. I
I would look at number 4. I think that looks a fairly thistle type hayfield. I would agree though, number 3 looks as though it's been farmed. Councillor Benny.
Myself and Councillor French went and had a look at this one day this week, and it's not cornfield, is it? It is just scrubland. It might look like it on there, but it's just grassy scrubland. It's a bit tufty, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say that is the benefit of actually going out on site rather than looking at a photograph.
Yeah.
You really have to go.
I've taken on board. I'm just looking. The photographs are very off-putting. Okay. The other question is, it was arable land. It is in its past, and it's not been commercially used for a long time. Is that what you're saying?
I suppose at some point in time, every part of the land in Fenland's been arable land, but as I say, this has certainly not been farmed for many, many years.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Benny.
Yeah. It says in 10.17, the application is accompanied by a sequential and exception test which advises that the area of search is Gorefield rather than the whole rural area. Officers disagree with this. As I say, it is considered to be outside the settlement of Gorefield, and as such, the sequential test is considered to fail. I take it from that the sequential test was done area-wide rather than specific to Gorefield. When you had the test done, did you do that looking for sites within Gorefield only? And what is your opinion about doing it over a bigger area where the bigger the area, the more likely you are to fail, aren't you?
Yeah, we've concentrated on Gorefield alone because, as I say, we literally are touching the built form. The village sign is in front of us. So it's clearly Gorefield. It's not an elsewhere location, in our opinion.
So what did you find in Gorefield that would be an alternative site?
As the report, which is in the thing, there was no land available that is not already being developed.
Further questions? No. Okay, thank you, Mr. Edmonds. I'd now like to invite members to put questions to officers. Questions for officers?
Sorry, Councillor Gant, can you use your microphone?
Thank you. I know we're looking at the application as it is today. However, the application was here before the planning committee in January 2022, and it was refused on 3 grounds and for 5 dwellings. Has anything changed between that previous application and this application we have in front of us now?
Thank you, through you, Chairman. The previous decision was actually a delegated decision, so it wasn't a committee decision, to answer the first part of your question. To answer the second part, essentially the application is the same as previously refused by the council.
Councillor Booth.
So, reading the report, the reason it's before committee is because there's 5 letters of support from Gorefield and 2 from the neighbouring ward of Leverington, or from the village of Leverington. So that's the 7 letters, which gets us over the 6-letter threshold. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Further questions? Okay, thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite members to debate the item in respect to the material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Councillor Booth.
Chair, I mean, this is within my ward, and as I said, I was present, although I didn't take part in discussion at the Gorefield Parish Council meeting when they looked at this plan, and has been said before, this has obviously come before, but was refused on delegated reasons. So I think part of the main reason that we need to look at this is whether we consider this is within the village of Gorefield or whether we think it's extending the boundary. And, you know, living quite near here, I would say actually your boundary is pretty much what those 2 sort of white speed limit signs. So to my mind, this is definitely, I think it's picture two. You can just sort of see them in the distance. That is kind of the boundary in my mind. So this would be extending the village boundary, which is obviously what the officer's referring to in policy-wise. So I think it would be going against policy from that perspective. So I find it difficult to support this one on that basis. Also, obviously, the parish council have recommended refusal for this site. I think we should listen to parish councils where we can, because they know what's happening locally and they've got local knowledge. Those are my initial thoughts, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments? Nope. Okay. Thank you, members. Does any officer have any points of clarification? As mentioned previously, I will be initially looking for a proposer to go with the officer's recommendation to refuse planning. Do I have a proposer for this recommendation? Councillor Booth. Do I have a seconder to go with this recommendation? Councillor Gester. Okay. We will now go to a vote. If you support the proposal to go with the officer's recommendation, please raise your hand.
2 votes, Chairman.
Okay. If you are against the proposal to go with officer's recommendation, please raise your hand.
4 votes, Chairman.
Okay. So that proposal has failed. So can I ask for a different proposal? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to draw members' attention to the code of practice, which I think was mentioned at the last committee meeting. And what the planning code of practice says, for those who are not familiar, it says members are advised that a serious risk of challenge is posed by failure to give and record clear and convincing planning reasons for the approval of planning applications where there is a history of refusals by the council. And in this case, we have a very recent refusal, which is within the last 12 months. And the code of practice also says that if the council is minded to approve an application previously refused, the proposer of the motion must state what significant change in planning circumstances has occurred since the previous decision. So that's just the council's code of practice requires that anyone who proposes that must point to a change in planning circumstances.
Is that, sorry, if I can ask a question, is
Yes.
that planning circumstances, or as we are a new committee, there are different people have different perceptions. We've had this question a couple of times, whereas today there are certainly there's 4 new faces on this today out of 7. So therefore there is a difference. I'm asking the question.
Yeah, indeed. And para 10 of the Code of Practice says the fact there's been a significant change in the membership of the Planning Committee does not justify inconsistency between current and previous decisions. So the change in personnel on the Planning Committee is not a planning reason for changing a previous decision.
Councillor Benny.
So here we are again. In a situation where the proposal to refuse it has been rejected. We are now in a position where another proposal is probably going to be put on the table, and we have to come up with reasons. The thing is, we have got another committee. People's opinions change, and as much as what has changed, maybe significantly not, but the opinion of the decision makers has changed. And because the opinion of the decision makers has changed, how do you get around that one? Because if the committee has voted that they don't want to refuse this, and they do want to approve it, how do you get around that one? Because if it looks like the committee want to approve this, it cannot be where things can be stuck forever, where things cannot change. We cannot not have change, because does this mean for the next 200 years this site will never be built on? Because things do change. The application itself hasn't, But we are in a position where the committee wants to approve this, or maybe we'll find out when it comes to a vote. So in terms of code of conduct, we are where we are. Members will vote whichever way. It could be that somebody will put a proposal forward to change, to approve this application, and members could change their mind, and that proposal could fail, and then we have to go back to another proposal, which would then be to refuse it. That's really where we are. And ultimately, yes, we talk of the code of conduct, which came up in conversation last month and has come up again this month. But legally, who's going to challenge it? Who's going to put the money up for a JR on this one? And really, if they do, as councillors, no councillor has ever been sent to prison for making a wrong decision. It will be the council that picks the bill up on it. So that's where we are. And you know, if it goes to the point and it then becomes an approved decision, yeah, that may not sit right with the code of conduct, but we will be where we are if members vote that way. How do we get around that one then, Stephen?
Well, thank you. Well, through you, Chairman, my response will be that things do change, and the answer from the council's constitutional point of view is policy can change. You can write your own local plan. You are looking at a new local plan. This site might become part of the settlement or be allocated, and that would be a change that might justify changing in the decision. But it's right that the council has to be consistent in its decision making. So if this came before a planning inspector who looked at the council's, if the council approves it now, having refused it last year, with no change in circumstances, it would be seen as a fairly eccentric decision, not consistent with previous decisions. And I'm not saying that you must refuse this application, but I have to point this out. This is not my code of practice, your code of practice, written by your members, and that's what it says. And if it came before an ombudsman, for example, rather than judicial review, an ombudsman has power to order payment of compensation and publicly declare the council is guilty of maladministration. I'm sure you members wouldn't want that to happen, but that might happen. Should you ignore your own code of practice?
But that still doesn't change the fact we are where we are. We're going to get a proposal on the table for something else, and members are going to vote a certain way. And if they vote that way, as they did last month, that is where we are with it. And the consequences of that will be dealt with later if it goes this way. Could be members change their mind and suddenly decide that they don't want another proposal, and then we'll go back to the first proposal, and then that will be refused. But that is an option that's on the table. But it will run its democratic process before we get there. So, you know, where do we go from there, Stephen? And the thing is, you have got 4 new members on this planning committee who were not here last time, and they are entitled to have a totally different, not a difference of opinion, an interpretation of policy. And with that interpretation of policy being taken in a different light, that is also how the decisions are arrived at. Just, you know, playing devil's advocate where we are.
Yeah, and what I would say is that the reason the code of practice says what it says is to try and encourage consistency in planning decisions. So it can't be right that new members of a committee take contrary decisions to previous historic decisions that have been made, particularly in the recent past. It's encouraging consistency in decision making, so the members of the public know which way the council is likely to vote.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think that gives us food for thought. Councillor Booth?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, you know, the code of practice is there to try and ensure consistency and make sure that this council looks like it is acting appropriately and consistently in regard to planning applications. It's one of the big criticisms we often get, that we don't have a consistent approach. So I guess I'll just draw members' attention, was it to page 171, where obviously it's refused on the 4th of August 22, and there's the 3 main reasons: policies LP3, LP12 and LP14. That was what was the reasons for refusing it. Personally, I don't see it as being a material change in policy. That we've got an opportunity to change policy, but that's when the local plan review takes place. You know, we don't change policy between committee meetings.
Thank you. Councillor French?
forgot what I was going to say. Yeah. It's interpretation, what officers interpret against what members interpret. Now, I could fully understand what Stephen is saying with the code of practice. If this had come to the planning committee last year and the committee refused it, yes, and it came back, we have to be consistent and refuse it. But as you know, over the years, many, many years, there is interpretation, what members say, and I think we can see this right across this afternoon's meeting, how we interpret policies against how officers. So I think, we can be justified by having a different view to officers. And that does not take anything away from the professionalism of officers. It's just we interpret it a different way.
Thank you. Councillor Gustner.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Benning. This is why we're a democracy. Everybody's got their own views on this. All I'm looking for is, again, an element of consistency, and if members decide to vote against officer recommendations, that they come up with, we've had this before, planning meeting, come up with valid planning reasons to go against officer recommendation. Thank you.
Anybody further? Councillor Benny.
Are you looking still for another proposal to go? Okay, well, I'll give you one, and if that fails, then we'll have to go back to the first one. But that members are now making an informed decision on where they are, which is why I've just said what I've said. But we are where we are. We have got to move out of this in some way. So I'll give you another proposal, and if it fails, it fails. And then we'll have to go back to the first one, which we've done here at committee before when that's not done. So, right, go against officer's recommendation and approve this application. Building in the open countryside, there is a building opposite this, and there is buildings. This is squaring the end of the village up. And many times I have said I like to see nice big houses on the entrance into a village. It sets the scene for people's opinions and how they feel about a village when they drive in. It would be nice to have some houses, and they are nice houses, and I'm sure they're very nice people who live in there. So that would cover LP3. In terms of LP12, this is not infill, but it does square the end of the village up. It does level out the boundaries where the buildings on the opposite side of this do square that up. And in terms of LP14 and the sequential test, if it's been done in Gorefield and only Gorefield, then according to the agent, of which I've got no evidence to counter that there are no other sites there, and therefore, if there are no other sites in Gorefield, then it would be reasonable to build on here. Flood zone 3 can be built on with mitigation risk, and the mitigation will certainly be there to cover that. So they would be my reasons for going against the officer's recommendation. Does that suit, Mr. Chairman?
Right, okay, no, I'm happy. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Benny's proposal? Councillor French. Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. So we are proposing to now go against officer's recommendation. All those in favour?
That's 5 votes, Chairman.
All those against?
2 votes, Chairman.
That's been passed. And that brings to the end of today's planning committee meeting. Thank you for everybody for attending, and we will see you all next month.